Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. Fast 5 2011 Movie Review. Fast 5, also known as Fast and Furious 5, is a 2011 American action film directed by Justin Lin and written by Chris Morgan. It is the sequel to Fast and Furious, 2009, and the fifth installment in the Fast and Furious franchise. The film stars Vin Diesel as Dominic Toretto and Paul Walker as Brian O'Connor, alongside AJordana Brewster, Tyrese Gibson, Gal Gadot, Ludacris, Matt Schultz, Sung Kang, and Dwayne Johnson. In the film, Dom and Brian, along with Dom's sister Mia, plan a heist to steal $100 million from corrupt businessman Hernan Reyes while being pursued for arrest by U.S. Diplomatic Security Service, DSS, agent Luke Hobbs. While developing Fast 5, Universal Pictures deliberately departed from the street racing theme prevalent in previous films in the series, to transform the franchise into a heist action series involving cars. By doing so, they hope to attract wider audiences that might otherwise be put off by a heavy emphasis on cars and car culture. Fast 5 is considered the transitional film in the series, featuring only one car race and giving more attention to action set pieces such as brawls, gunfights, and the central heist. The production mounted a comprehensive marketing campaign, with the film being advertised through social media, virtual games, cinema chains, automobile manufacturers, and at NASCAR races. Lin, Diesel, and Walker's returns were finalized in February 2010. Principal photography began that July and lasted until that October, with filming locations including Atlanta, Puerto Rico, and Rio de Janeiro. Brian Tyler, the composer of the previous two installments, returned to compose the score. The film is notable for primarily featuring practical stunt work as opposed to computer-generated imagery. Fast 5 premiered at the Cinépolis Lagoon in Rio de Janeiro on April 15, 2011, and was released in the United States on April 29 by Universal. The film received positive reviews, with praise for Lin's direction, the action sequences, and the cast's performances. It is widely considered the best film in the franchise. Fast 5 grossed $630 million worldwide, becoming the seventh highest grossing film of 2011, the then highest grossing film in the franchise, and set several records related to Universal's highest grossing opening weekend in several international markets. It was followed by Fast and Furious 6 in 2013. As Dominic Toretto is being transported by bus to Lompoc Prison, his sister Mia Toretto and friend Brian O'Connor lead an assault on the bus and free Dom. While the authorities search for them, the trio escape to Rio de Janeiro. Awaiting Dom's arrival, Brian and Mia join their friend Vince and other participants on a job to steal 3 cars from a train. Brian and Mia learn that agents from the DEA are on the train and that the cars are seized property. When Dom arrives with his accomplices, he realizes that their leader Zizi is only interested in stealing the Ford GT40. Dom has Mia steal the car herself before he and Brian fight Zizi and his henchmen, during which Zizi kills the DEA agents. Dom and Brian are captured and brought to drug lord Hernan Reyes, the owner of the cars and Zizi's boss. Reyes orders the pair interrogated to discover the car's location, but they escape to their safe house. Dom, Brian, and Mia are framed as the murderers of the DEA agents, and the U.S. government sends a team of Diplomatic Security Service agents, led by DSS agent Luke Hobbs and assisted by State Police Officer Elena Navis, to Rio to arrest them. While Dom, Brian, and Mia examine the car to discover its importance, Vince arrives and is caught removing a computer chip from it. He admits he was planning to sell the chip to Reyes, and Dom angrily forces him to leave. Brian discovers the chip contains financial details of Reyes's criminal empire, including the locations of $100 million in cash. Hobbs and his team arrive at Dom's safe house, but find it under assault by Reyes' men searching for the chip. Dom, Brian, and Mia escape after a chase across the favelas. Dom suggests they split up and leave Rio, but Mia announces she is pregnant with Brian's child. Dom agrees to stick together, suggesting they steal Reyes' money to start a new life. They recruit Han Lu, Giselle Yashar, Tigo Leo, and Rico Santos, Dom's former allies, as well as Roman Pierce and Tej Parker, Brian's partners from his mission in Miami. To centralize the cash, Dom's team attacks one of the locations and burns the money in front of Reyes's staff. Afraid of further attacks, Reyes consolidates the remaining money in an evidence vault inside a police station. Dom's team does surveillance, buys equipment, and acquires Reyes's handprint. After their fastest cars prove to be too slow for security cameras, they steal 4 2010 Dodge Charger police cars to blend in. Vince rejoins Dom's team after saving Mia from Reyes's men. Hobbs's team eventually finds and arrests Dom, Mia, Brian, and Vince. While transporting them for extradition to the United States in a Gurkha LAPV, the convoy is attacked by Reyes's men. Dom, Brian, Mia, and Vince help Hobbs and Elena escape the ambush, but the rest of Hobbs's men and Vince are killed. Enraged at their team's deaths, Hobbs and Elena agree to help with the heist. The gang breaks into the police station with the LAPV and uses 2 of the Chargers to tear the vault holding Reyes's money from the building, dragging it through the city. Advancing on the bridge after an extensive police chase, Dom has Brian continue without him while he smashes the police and Reyes's vehicles with the vault. Brian returns and kills CZ. Hobbs arrives and executes the injured Reyes in retribution for his team. Hobbs gives Dom and Brian a 24-hour head start to escape on the condition they leave the vault as it is. When Dom and Brian depart, however, Hobbs finds the vault empty, as Dom's crew switched it via a trash truck before they reached the bridge. After splitting the cash and giving Vince's family his cut, Dom's team go their separate ways. In Monaco, Leo and Santos are gambling away their share at a casino. Han and Giselle are on vacation traveling down the German Autobahn. Tej and Roman have each purchased their very own Koenigsegg CCXR edition, and on a tropical beach, Brian challenges Dom to a final, no-stakes race to prove who is the better driver. During the end credits, Dom and Brian are seen racing each other in their new cars to the limit. In a mid-credits scene in Washington, D.C., Hobbs is given a file by Monica Fuentes concerning the hijack of a military convoy in Berlin, where he discovers a recent photo of Dom's girlfriend, Letty, who had been presumed dead. By February 3, 2010, it was confirmed that a 5th film, referred to as Fast 5, was going into production in the Fast and Furious series, and that a 6th film was being planned. It was also confirmed that Diesel, Walker, writer Chris Morgan and producer Neal H. Moritz would all return to their roles for the new installment. Moritz said that, following the success of Fast and Furious, 2009, which had reunited Diesel, Walker, Rodriguez, and Brewster from the Fast and the Furious, 2001, the production wanted to bring them back again for this film, but however, Rodriguez ultimately didn't appear in this film and only made a cameo appearance during the mid-credits scene. Diesel felt that the story between the characters portrayed by himself and Walker should continue, envisioning it as 3 chapters, of which this film would be the last. Diesel also wanted to bring back a variety of characters that had been in previous films without interacting, put them together and have a lot of fun. The production had originally intended to film on location in Rio de Janeiro. However, the Puerto Rican government offered tax incentives totaling nearly $11 million, influencing the decision to film there, using Puerto Rico to represent Rio de Janeiro. Universal intended to transform the series from street racing action into a series of heist films with car chases in the vein of The Italian Job, 1969, and The French Connection, 1971, with Fast 5 as the transitional movie. In April 2011, Universal chairman Adam Fogelson said, "The question putting Fast 5 and Fast 6 together for us was, can we take it out of being a pure car culture movie and into being a true action franchise in the spirit of those great heist films made 10 or 15 years ago?" Fogelson said that the racing aspect had put a ceiling on the number of people willing to see films in the series, and that, by turning it into a series where car driving ability is just one aspect of the film, He hoped to increase the series' audience. Lin wanted to explore the elements of freedom and family in the film and collaborated with Morgan towards that ideal, both having worked together on The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift, 2006, and Fast and Furious, 2009. Morgan worked with Diesel to produce a story arc that would further explore and develop Diesel's character. An idea involving heisting a large safe had been conceived by Morgan during the production of Fast and Furious, 2009, but that film's premise did not work with how Morgan envisioned it. He later incorporated it into this film. On a budget of $125 million, the shooting of Fast 5 was scheduled for July and August 2010. Shooting had started by July 14, 2010. 3 film units worked simultaneously. The main cast were required to travel to Rio at the behest of Lin, who felt it important to understand the area and its culture to give the film a good sense of place. Diesel agreed that it was important to shoot key scenes in Brazil, commenting, "We were able to shoot where other productions might not be able to shoot because our franchise has such good street cred." The Rio film unit captured aerial shots of the city including Sugarloaf Mountain, Fort Copacabana, Ipanema Beach, the Dona Marta lookout point and the Christ the Redeemer statue. Establishing shots of the heist team members were taken as each arrived in Rio. Gibson was filmed arriving in character at Galeão International Airport, but, when it became publicly known that a scene was being shot at the airport, the cast and crew were mobbed. A similar situation occurred while Ludacris was shooting a scene in which his character buys a car to drive around the city. A scene where the completed heist team walked down a beach was filmed in Copacabana. The rooftop pursuit across favelas was filmed in Puerto Rico, where the production could have more control over the area. The main and second filming units began filming in and around the capital, San Juan. The island's mixture of tropical greenery and wide streets allowed the production to recreate the densely populated favelas of Rio while completing the larger action and external scenes without incident. Production designer Peter Wenham had the task of transforming Puerto Rico and Atlanta into the previously scouted Rio locations in 4 weeks, as the production deemed Rio unsuitable for filming many of the larger scenes. Wenham had to reinforce buildings to support the heavy camera equipment, and to alter the colors of more than 30 buildings in the city to make them suitable for filming. His team needed to alter the buildings and strew debris to make the area look disheveled and appear as a Rio favela. Wenham remarked that, though the development was difficult, in part due to the heat, it was a walk in the park compared with filming in the Rio favelas themselves. Wenham aimed to maintain a monochromatic color scheme for the film, with muted blacks and grays, including his choice of colors for the cars used. He only chose to add a multitude of colors in the favela set. The Teodoro Mosquisco Bridge connecting San Juan to neighboring Isla Verde was used to film the final showdown between DOM and Reyes, while a U.S. Navy base pier 60 miles outside San Juan stood in for the bridge for scenes involving the vault-smashing cars. Action scenes were also filmed in the Hato Rey and Rio Piedras districts of San Juan. A foot pursuit in which Diesel, Brewster, and Walker are pursued across favela rooftops by Johnson and his team was filmed over the course of a week in the small hillside town of Naranjito, Puerto Rico. The scene was considered difficult to shoot, as pathways were slippery from moist tropical heat and the scene involved actors and stunt doubles running while avoiding dogs, chickens, and other stray animals loose in the area. To capture the scene, a 420-foot cable camera rig was used to allow for a fast-moving, bird's-eye view of the action, and cameras on cranes were set up on rooftops and in alleyways. Walker and Brewster made multiple takes of the conclusion of the scene, requiring them to jump nearly 30 feet from a building onto a waiting safety mat. In total, the production employed 236 technicians, 13,145 extras, and generated 16,824 room nights at hotels, contributing $27 million to the Puerto Rican community. Filming moved to Atlanta, Georgia. For the final phase, Wenham and his team transformed a defunct train yard into an abandoned auto plant used by the protagonists as their headquarters. Redesigning the train yard took place over several months. It was required to allow enough space for stunt drivers to drive into the building, and it had to include an integrated lighting system. The design team removed walls, hauled out old railway cars, suspended rusted car parts and auto plant car rails, and constructed smaller buildings within the main building to transform the site. With 25 pages of script to shoot in a limited time, cinematographer Stephen Winden and his team spent 3 weeks setting up a series of high-powered, motorized lights in the rafters of the building, that could be controlled remotely to allow lighting to be altered quickly while fully illuminating the set. 40 An exterior scene involving Diesel and Walker attending a car party, involving several high-performance cars, was filmed near the Georgia Dome. The train heist scene was filmed in Rice, California over 3 weeks. A brawl scene between Johnson's and Diesel's characters was considered difficult to choreograph. The characters were written to be equally formidable, so the fight was punctuated with moments of character development, as Moritz felt this made the fight more exciting. The scene required several weeks of rehearsal and more than a week of filming by the actors and their stunt doubles, who incurred several minor injuries. The Moving Picture Company, MPC, provided the visual effects for the film in Vancouver, British Columbia. Guillaume Roch-Aron was the visual effects supervisor, and Don Brooks McLeod was the visual effects producer. The studio completed around 240 shots for the film's high-speed train heist sequence, which included a CGI train, bridge, and canyon, digital fire and destruction shots and Paul Walker and Vin Diesel DG doubles. The bridge and canyon were animated with computer animation, with the canyon also being created as 2.5D matte paintings, with the team using guide photo references of the Marble Canyon in Arizona. The effects department also created high-resolution volume trick dust that would cut back-to-back with practical shots as well as complex digital fire and destruction effects for when the truck crashes into the bridge and tumbles behind the car, forcing our heroes to jump into the canyon. MPC's Nuke 3D pipeline was put at full use to create animated background stitches that were used to add in the desert environment on the green screen shots. Pixomondo also provided the visual effects for the film in Los Angeles, California. Rainer Gombosch was the visual effects supervisor, and Sophie Leclerc was the visual effects producer. The climactic vault heist required 4 weeks of preparation with every scene and camera angle determined in advance. The filmmakers hired stuntmen Spiro Rosatos and Jack Gill to direct the second unit action filming and serve as stunt coordinator respectively. The pair initially began research for the stunt by testing the capabilities of the prop vaults and the Dodge Chargers driven by Diesel and Walker. Filmed on the streets of Hato-Rey, the chaotic scene demanded specific timing that had to be synchronized with the various character interactions also occurring during the scene. Rosatos chose to use a series of camera cars including a crane-mounted camera atop a Porsche Cayenne, which allowed him to film from a variety of angles and heights while the vehicles were in motion, and a Subaru Impreza with a steel cage built around it that allowed for tracking shots. The Subaru's driver Alan Paddleford would occasionally accidentally collide with the vault, creating a shower of sparks that inadvertently became useful footage. Paddleford also developed a top-mount dual-drive system for the Chargers that allowed a stunt driver to control the vehicle from the roof, while the actor focused on their performance inside the car. 6 versions of the 8-foot-high vault were built, each with specific uses. One of the vaults was a facade built onto the front of a semi-truck and was used for filming close shots of the vault destroying street cars. Another vault was a reinforced, 4-wheel self-drive vehicle that was connected to 30-foot, 9.1 m, cables and dragged through the streets of San Juan by the 2 stunt Dodge Chargers. The 4-short-ton, 3.6 t, vault was driven by stunt driver Henry Kingy, who had to wear a temperature-controlled suit to compensate for the temperatures within that could exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit 38 degrees Celsius. A scene where the vault tumbled as the cars rounded a corner was a practical effect, and the result was more violent than the filmmakers had anticipated. Over 200 vehicles were destroyed by the vault during filming. Several stunts had to be cut, including a final scene that would have seen the vault hanging over the edge of the Teodoro Moscoso Bridge. This stunt was abandoned when it was determined that even the powerful Chargers would not be able to support the vault's weight. The train heist presented several challenges. The filmmakers were required to effectively purchase a length of working railroad for filming and the trains necessary to ride the tracks. Then trucks had to be built that could race the train and meet the needs of the heist itself. Lin also required that the cars being carried on the train be able to jump out of the train at full speed. The scene took precise execution. The filmmakers chose to use cars they could cheaply replicate for the train heist: in 1972 de Tomaso Pantera, a 2007 Chevrolet Corvette GS Roadster, and a Ford GT40 to avoid the expense of replacing a genuine $2 million Ford GT40. The film soundtrack was released on iTunes on April 25, 2011, and on CD on May 3, 2011, by Obco Records. It features many reggaeton and rhythmic Latin tracks, including songs by Don Omar, Busta Rhymes and many others, with 3 pieces from Tyler's original score for the film, Assembling the Team, Mad Skills and Fast 5 Suite. Music Guide AllMusic awarded the album 3 stars out of 5, commenting that the goal here is to accompany a picture that, as usual, is packed with driving sequences involving flashy cars, beautiful, scantily clad women, and muscled men. That goal is accomplished with this beat-heavy music and the gruff, aggressive Latin rapping. Ludacris collaborated with Slaughterhouse and Claret J for the soundtrack's lead single, Furiously Dangerous. The film score was released on May 3, 2011, by Varese Sarabande. The release has 25 tracks and plays for 78 minutes. The score spent 4 weeks on the Billboard 200, peaking as high as number 60 and reaching number 24 on the digital albums chart and number 5 on the soundtrack-only chart. The Facebook game Cartown by CIE Games and the theater chain Regal Entertainment Group, Reg, collaborated with Universal in a cross-media marketing promotion. Cartown allowed players to view the trailer for the film in an Reg-branded, in-game drive-in theater and race around a virtual Rio de Janeiro. The game also featured missions and locations based on the plot of the film, while allowing players to race against Fast 5 characters and take part in a bank heist. Reg offered players of Cartown the ability to purchase tickets in-game via Fandango for films at Reg theaters. By buying these tickets in-game, players were given promotional codes which in turn allowed them to unlock a virtual 1970s Dodge Charger, used by Diesel's character in the original film. Reg promoted the partnership between the film and the game in their theaters across 37 states, online and through social media, while Universal promoted it via their own Facebook, Twitter and YouTube sites. In October 2011, it was claimed that over 200 million races had taken place within the virtual Rio de Janeiro environment in the 6 months since the campaign's April launch. Automobile manufacturer Dodge collaborated with Universal in marketing the film, supplying several Dodge Chargers to use in it. The partnership with Dodge included the Fast 5 Dodge Charger driven by Robbie Gordon in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series throughout April 2011, the opening month of Fast 5. Dodge also sponsored the world premiere of the film in Rio de Janeiro. Fast 5 was originally planned to be released on June 10, 2011 before being pushed forward to April 29. The film held its world premiere at the Simplus Lagoon Theatre in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, on April 15. On August 2, 2011, USA Network purchased the rights to the United States network premiere of Fast 5. The film was released on DVD and Blu-ray in the United Kingdom on September 5, 2011, and in the United States on October 4, 2011, in 2.35:1 aspect ratio with DTS HD Master Audio 5.1 sound. A triple pack was also released containing a Blu-ray, DVD, and digital copy of the film in either Blu-ray or DVD packaging. The Blu-ray versions contain several exclusive additional features, including behind-the-scenes footage, cast and crew interviews, a virtual car garage that provides further details on the vehicles used in the production, and music tracks from the film. Both the DVD and the Blu-ray contain a theatrical cut of 130 minutes and extended cut of 132 minutes of the film, director commentary, deleted scenes, a gag reel and features on the 3 central characters. Citation needed. Commenting on the extended cut, Lin said, "This is the version that I prefer." During first week sales in the United States, the DVD was the #1 selling DVD, the #1 rental DVD, and the #2 selling Blu-ray disc behind the Blu-ray re-release of The Lion King. 57% of the total first week disc sales of Fast 5 were the Blu-ray disc version. To promote the release of the DVD and Blu-ray, Universal Studios Home Entertainment sponsored the first race of the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series, at the Chicagoland Speedway. The event, renamed as the Fast 5 225, took place on September 16, 2011, with Gibson and Brewster as Grand Marshals. Gibson sang the American national anthem for the event and Brewster acted as honorary starter. The event served as the kickoff for the first weekend of the chase for the Sprint Cup and was won by Austin Dillon. 64. The deal marked the first time that a film promotion had been allowed to take over a NASCAR race as a title sponsor. Continuing the partnership with Cartown, the game was used as the exclusive means of pre-ordering the Blu-ray/DVD combo release at Walmart, via players clicking on a Walmart-themed truck, which in turn provided the player with Fast 5 branded in-game rewards. Fast 5 was released on 4K UHD Blu-ray on June 11, 2019. Fast 5 grossed $209.8 million, 33.5%, in the United States and Canada, and $416.3 million, 66.5%, in other territories, for a total of $626.1 million. Worldwide, it is the seventh highest grossing film of 2011. It achieved a worldwide opening weekend of $109.6 million. The film reached a peak of number 55 on the list of all-time highest grossing films worldwide in October 2011. It became the highest grossing film in the Fast and Furious franchise in worldwide grosses, as well as separately in the US and Canada, and outside the US and Canada, but was outgrossed in all three cases by Fast and Furious 6. According to Box Office Mojo, Fast 5 is one of the most successful sequels of 2011, when taking into account that it is one of few to have outperformed the immediately preceding installment of its franchise in the US and Canada. Fast 5 opened in the United States on April 29, 2011, in 3,644 theaters. It took $3.8 million in midnight showings, setting new records for the Fast and Furious series and Universal, both records overtaken by Fast and Furious 6. By the end of its opening day, it had accrued a total of $34.4 million, including midnight earnings, setting an April opening day record, replacing Fast and Furious, $30.5 million, and marking the third largest Friday outside of the summer and holiday period, behind the Hunger Games and Alice in Wonderland. In total, Fast 5 earned $86.2 million during its opening weekend, an average of $23,655 per theater, with IMAX showings contributing over $8 million. It thus set an opening weekend record for the Fast and Furious series, for Universal, both records overtaken by Fast and Furious 6, and for films released in April, the record was surpassed in 2014 by Captain America: The Winter Soldier. It also achieved the third largest spring opening, behind The Hunger Games and Alice in Wonderland. The film also set an opening weekend record among films starring Diesel, Walker, Brewster, Johnson, Moritz, and Lin, records overtaken in all cases by Fast and Furious 6. The film opened dropped 62% on its second weekend, earning $32.4 million, and ranking second behind Thor. This result was partially attributed to the reduction in IMAX and large format screens showing the film, reduced from 244 to 20 since IMAX contributed only $510,000 to the film's second weekend gross. On June 4, 2011, 37 days after release in the US, the film became the first of 2011 to accrue more than $200 million. The film received a one-week re-release in IMAX theaters on September 30, 2011. The film drew revenues of $209,837,675 in the US and Canada, $416,300,000 elsewhere, for a worldwide total of $626,137,675. The box office ranking peaked at number 1 for all films of 2011, as of 2021, ranked at number 6, number 103 for all-time US films, as of 2021, ranked number 197, and for all-time worldwide films number 55, as of 2021, at number 151. Fast 5 was initially released in Australia on Wednesday, April 20, 2011, 9 days before the release date in North America, followed by releases in the UK, South Korea, and New Zealand. The earlier start in these countries was timed to coincide with their Easter holidays and avoided competition from forthcoming summer films, although this placed it in direct competition with Thor in some countries. By the end of its opening weekend, the film had accrued a total of $23.4 million from these countries. On its second weekend, Fast 5 earned $46.3 million across 3,139 theaters in 14 countries, ranking first at the box office in each of its 10 new markets. For the overall weekend, it ranked second behind Thor. In the third weekend of release, Fast 5 topped the box office in a further 44 countries, playing in a total of 6,979 theaters across 58 countries. It ranked first during the weekend with $85.8 million. It set an opening weekend record in the United Arab Emirates, $1.65 million, holding this record for 2 weeks before being outgrossed by Pirates of the Caribbean, on Stranger Tides, $2.24 million. Across all markets, the film scored Universal's highest-grossing opening weekend in Russia, Spain, Turkey, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, France, India, Italy, Malaysia, Mexico, the Netherlands, Thailand, the United Arab Emirates and Vietnam. On Rotten Tomatoes, Fast 5 has an approval rating of 77% with an average rating of 207 based on 207 reviews. The website's critical consensus reads, "Sleek, loud, and over the top, Fast 5 proudly embraces its brainless action thrills and injects new life into the franchise." On Metacritic, the film has a score of 66 out of 100, based on reviews from 41 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale. Roger Ebert gave the film 3 out of 4 stars, praising it as a skillfully assembled 130 minutes at the movies, with actors capable of doing absurd things with straight faces, and action sequences that toy idly with the laws of physics, while Richard Corliss of Time considered it maybe the first great film of the post-human era. The New York Times said it deftly combined action and humor, stating the only time you won't be watching the screen is when your eyes have squeezed shut because you're laughing so hard. The Telegraph appreciated the presence of Johnson and Diesel together, calling it a cosmic event, and added that director Lin had revitalized the series, saying the start and finish here, defying every imaginable law of physics, are series highs. 108 Empire also heaped praise on Johnson, saying how to reignite an aging franchise. Drop Johnson on it. The best thing, by far, in Fast 5. Dwayne Johnson hulks through the movie leaving testosterone trails in his wake. However, Empire took the view that the film itself was not, by any normal criteria, a good film, arguing that it was too long, although conceding that the action scenes, in particular the final car chase, made the film the most entertaining in the series. Anna Smith of Time Out London also commented that the film was too long and criticized the simplistic characters and dialogue, but she called the film slick and stated that these criticisms could be overlooked because it doesn't take itself too seriously. Variety focused on the roles of Johnson and Diesel, lamenting the current lack of 1980s-style brawny leading men and of the manly men typical of the 1950s and 1960s, and calling their pairing a welcome injection of tough guy vigor. Variety commented that, based on Fast 5, a sixth entry could be something worth waiting for. The New Yorker called the action scenes spectacular, praising director Lin by saying his direction and the sharp editing never confuse or lose momentum, but also found the film too long and criticized the dialogue, labeling it subpar Ocean's 11 style banter on the characters. The New Yorker considered Walker and Diesel serviceable, but singled out Johnson for praise for bringing a hip comic knowingness to his role. His enjoyment is infectious and keeps the movie speeding along. Total. Film welcomed the return of Ludacris and Tyrese Gibson to inject the film with much-needed laughs and felt that Johnson fit into the established cast with ease, though it believed the film itself was no mold breaker. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone, who disliked the previous movies, gave the film 2.5 stars out of 4, praising the transformation of the series into a heist film. "Damn it, it works," commenting favorably on scenes between Johnson and Diesel, and judging that Fast 5 will push all your action buttons, and some you haven't thought of. The Los Angeles Times felt that scenes shared by Diesel and Johnson were the best moments and appreciated the humor, but considered the pacing a strange mix, switching between exposition, comedy scenes, and then sudden action. The reviewer echoed other critics' sentiments concerning the running time of the film, but concluded that the sheer audacity of Fast 5 is kind of breathtaking in a metal-twisting, death-defying, mission-implausible, B-movie on steroids kind of way, labeling it the best of the series. Both Empire and Variety noted that the final chase scene of Fast 5 contained allusions to Bad Boys 2, 2003. Variety stated that the scene seems inspired in part by a similarly spectacular scene in Bad Boys 2. Empire said that it nearly out Bad Boys 2's Bad Boys 2. Not all reviews were positive. Film 4 criticized both the film's long running time and its treatment of female characters, remarking some cameos strikingly in buttock form. Others actually have first names. But Film 4 praised Johnson's role as DSS agent Luke Hobbs, saying he provides a more credible anti-antagonist to our anti-heroes than the straight-up villains can manage. The Boston Herald gave a more mixed reaction. It derided the lack of realism as removing any sense of threat to the protagonists, but conceded that these films may be robustly anti-intellectual and deplorably commercialized, but they are the envy of the rest of the world. Despite giving the film a positive review and praising the action, The Hollywood Reporter was critical of its stars, saying it's clear the budget wasn't used on acting lessons for the cast. Time Out New York stated that the Fast and the Furious movies haven't exactly gotten better as they've gone along, but gave the director a backhanded compliment, saying Justin Lin, taking his third turn behind the franchise's wheel, is at least a competent hack. Ebert was more complimentary, saying Justin Lin is emerging as a first-rate director in this second-rate genre, and Rolling Stone managed Justin Lin, who misdirected the last two sequels, finds his pace this time, staging dynamite action. Brazilian reviewers criticized the use of Rio de Janeiro in the film, claiming it was stereotyped as dominated by heavily armed drug traffickers, corrupt police, and sexy women. O Globo accused the producers of using aerial shots and quick editing to deceive the viewer into believing that the criminal acts take place in Rio. Globo also reacted negatively to the use of foreigners to represent Brazilians, speaking Portuguese with laughable accents. Veja agreed with O Globo, saying, "The city of Rio and the Rio Film Commission supported the production. But the image that will spread across the world is exactly what the city doesn't want." In December 2011, Richard Corliss ranked the film number 10 on his list of the top 10 best movies of 2011, saying, "A carnival of roguish heroes and pretty girls, car chases and cliffhangers, Fast 5 is as much a tribute as the artist or Hugo to the cinema's primal thrills." Empire placed the film number 20 on its list of the top 20 films of 2011, while IGN named it the best action movie of 2011. Fast 5 was listed as the number 1 most illegally downloaded film of 2011 on BitTorrent with approximately 9.3 million downloads. A white bus full of prison inmates ambles down a lonely desert road. 3 fast cars zoom in behind it, then beside it, then in front. You know what's coming. One flipped prison bus later, outlaw street racer Dominic Toretto is a free man again. Free, that is, to get out of Dodge, so to speak. And fast. And probably in a Dodge. High on the FBI's most wanted list, DOM, ex-cop Brian O'Connor and Dom's sister, Mia, O'Connor's girlfriend, head south. Way south, to Rio de Janeiro's favela slums, where they hope to lie low until the heat subsides. But sitting still isn't a strong suit for DOM and his crew. Especially when they're dead broke. So when Dom's childhood friend, Vince, who's been holed up in the favelas for years, suggests they score some quick cash helping a shady local pinch 3 exotic cars being transported on a train, they're game. After all, it's just a little job that goes wrong in a big way. 3 dead DEA agents later taken out by lackeys of the aforementioned shady local, a man named Reyes who runs Rio's crime syndicate DOM and Co. quickly graduate to the top of the FBI's stack of personas non grata. And the fact that they didn't commit the crime they're being accused of matters little to Agent Luke Hobbs, a Terminator-minded emissary dispatched to hunt them down. Above all else, Hobbs tells his team, "We don't ever let them get in the cars." It's a good command. Of course, it's also impossible to enforce. With Hobbs in hot pursuit of his fast and furious quarry, DOM and O'Connor decide it's time to disappear again. Forever. And that takes money. As luck and the script writer would have it, a GPS chip in one of the cars they stole tells them exactly where Reyes launders his $100 million drug fortune. So DOM recruits some old friends for one last brazen heist, Brazilian style. As lack of luck would have it, their effort to outfox Reyes backfires, and he locks his fortune away in a bank-like vault in Rio's downtown police department. After all, virtually every officer in the city works for him anyway. But that's nothing a few fast cars and wily, on-the-lam former street racers can't handle, right? Did I already mention that they're being systematically tracked by the guy formerly known as The Rock? Within the convoluted context of this franchise, DOM and his car-stealing cohorts subscribe to a fierce family fidelity. In a speech to the group he recruits to pull off the heist, which, in addition to Brian and Mia, includes FNF alumni Roman, Tej, Han, Giselle, Santos, and Leo, DOM tells them, money will come and go. The most important thing in life will always be the people in this room. Right here, right now. Salute, mi familia. DOM would go to any length to protect Mia, except, of course, excusing her from the crazy duties involved with stealing cars and driving them away, it seems. The same is true of Brian, and even more so after he learns she's pregnant. After the first car theft goes awry, DOM evicts Vince from the group for not telling them who they were working for. Later, Vince saves Mia's life, and DOM welcomes him back, saying, "There's always room for family." Conversations between DOM and Brian revolve around the subject of family and fatherhood. DOM talks about his father's devotion, while Brian remembers little of his dad. DOM assures Brian that he'll be a good father. DOM also has deep sympathy for a local police officer named Elena Navis, whom Hobbs has recruited to help him. Like DOM, Elena lost a partner she loved deeply. DOM lost his beloved Letty in Fast and Furious. Each seems to understand the other's suffering. As in Fast and Furious, the Toretto clan's Catholic faith is referenced. And DOM and Mia wear crucifixes which they seem quite fond of. References are made to saying grace before meals. DOM says his father always barbecued on Sundays after church, and that if there was no church, there was no barbecue. When a member of his crew gets killed, DOM genuflects and says, "You were always my brother." Brian describes Hobbs as being like someone out of the Old Testament: blood, bullets, wrath of God. One of Reyes' men says of the police protection around the safe, "God himself couldn't get your money if he wanted to." The camera repeatedly shows us Rio's famous Christ the Redeemer statue. At a street race, as is customary in this franchise, cameras zoom in on women wearing next to nothing, sometimes as little as a thong bikini. A beach scene boasts even more women in skimpy suits. Perhaps a dozen women employed at one of Rhea's money laundering operations work in bras and panties. Rhea's office sports a large, Renaissance-style painting of a woman with one breast exposed. Elena, Mia, and Giselle all wear less than modest outfits that expose leg, cleavage and slash or midriff. One scene features Giselle in a bikini, and the camera lingers on her physique, as she entices Reyes to caress and grab her backside in a ploy to get his fingerprints. Brian and Mia kiss several times. Obviously, sex between the unmarried couple is implied by her pregnancy. Crude comments invoke sex, legs, backsides and genitals. In a scene that hints ever so slightly at sexualized violence, Dom roughly grabs the crucifix Elena is wearing, which belonged to Letty, from between her breasts. There's no shortage of vehicular carnage, from the opening scene where the bus rolls repeatedly, to an explosive train heist in which 3 cars are stolen and 3 men shot. One car plunges over a cliff with Dom and Brian in it. A massive car chase through downtown Rio serves as the finale. In that last bit of N2O-fueled mayhem, Dom's and Brian's cars have cables attached to the massive vault, which they've yanked out of the police station after ramming through several walls with a truck. For 10 or 15 minutes they careen wildly through town, the trailing vault smashing car after car. Even a building ends up quite a bit worse for the wear. Over and over again, pedestrians scamper to avoid being mortally clocked by the vault as it ricochets like a 20-ton pinball. Dom and Brian use the tow cables to clothesline police cars, many of which, and, presumably, their drivers, meet mangled ends. The chase ends with a vengeful killing as a man lies on the ground, begging for mercy. He's shot in the head, just off screen. An ambush involves RPGs and grenades taking out vehicles, and an entire team of drivers getting killed. We see several bodies on the ground. Retaliation consists of shooting and killing perhaps a dozen more people. Other shootouts or on-foot chases, one across the many leveled roofs of the favela shanties, result in dozens more anonymous pursuers getting gunned down. A man's neck is snapped. Dom and Brian hang from their wrists in a prison cell. Multiple men are knocked out. An epic hand-to-hand battle between Hobbs and Dom features all manner of brutal hits and body blows, not to mention plunging through panes of glass, a mirror, walls, and tables. 2 characters fall through a roof. People drink beer and hard liquor in quite a few scenes. Brian and Vince are shown with 5 or 6 empty beer bottles in front of them. Mia abstains from alcohol because of her pregnancy. Callous thieves, speeding cars, corrupt cops and exploding sewage. That's Fast 5 for you. A pipe bomb in the police department explodes and hurls sewage all over the men's restroom and all over a guy on a toilet. There's a crude reference to urinating. It's a crowd-pleasing moment when Hobbs decides to join Dom's group after all his men get gunned down, which makes it no less a moral and ethical compromise motivated by Hobbs' thirst for vengeance. "I'll ride with you, Toretto," he says. "At least until we kill that son of a BCH." At the end of the film, sort of like in an old Looney Tunes short, Hobbs tells Dom that he has to keep chasing him, but that he'll give him a 24-hour head start. On top of that, the film invites viewers to believe that Dom's crew stealing $100 million from a notoriously wicked drug lord has a kind of Robin Hood-esque nobility to it. Movie number 5. Just like movie number 4. Etc. This 2011 installment is exactly what you'd expect: Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, and their supporting cast, which now includes Dwayne Johnson doing absolutely insane things with cars and looking very cool doing it. According to the movie's production notes, the filmmakers bought and destroyed nearly 300 cars making Fast 5. And if close-up shots of hood ornaments are any indication, the vast majority not counting your requisite Nissan GT-Rs, Ford GT40S, Damaso Panteras, and Porsche 911 GT3 RSS were new Dodge Chargers. The heist angle this time smacks of something like Ocean's 11 or The Italian Job. And Rhea's determination to take out both Dom's crew and Hobbs smacks of clear and present danger too. So I guess it'd be unfair to say that Fast 5 only plagiarizes earlier films in its own franchise. No doubt the filmmakers hope to do nothing more than give audiences what David Letterman calls more explosions. More explosions. It's an adrenaline-charged good time for giddy gearheads. But it's also chock full of intense violence, profanity, and titillation. And beyond that, at the risk of sounding like a broken flywheel, this latest FNF film once again delivers a dubious, self-contained, and subjective morality. At one point, Brian says the money they steal from Reyes will be enough to purchase new passports, new lives. Then he adds, "We'll buy our freedom." It's easy to swallow that feel-good line without much thought, because these characters' loyalty and family-like bonds pull at our sympathies. But the film is essentially saying that instead of paying the price for reckless, illegal activity, all you have to do is engage in more of the same, look smooth while you do it, then cash out to beat the system completely. Absolutely no one who's even remotely interested in this film's fast cars and fearless action is really thinking about what that message does to our worldviews. Which is exactly why I'm bringing it up. I was late to the relaunched Fast and Furious franchise, which seemed to die with 2006's Tokyo Drift before unexpectedly coming back to life with the much improved Fast and Furious 3 years later. Fast 5 was released in 2011, with the benefit of hindsight it probably represents the high water mark of the entire series. The action focus shifts from street racing to criminal heists, and the story shifts out of the USA and into the more varied and exciting South America. Subsequent sequels arguably push the audience's suspension of disbelief too far, although that has a charm of its own, and that leaves 5 as the franchise's all-time sweet spot. If Fast and Furious represented an unexpected jump in quality from the original The Fast and the Furious, then Fast 5 represents an unexpected jump again. This is a tremendously fun movie packed with appealing actors, entertaining action scenes and ridiculous over-the-top stunts. The trade-off between realism and fun definitely shifts here, and comes to define the series going forwards. In many respects it also makes the series critic-proof. The characters may lack realism and often depth, but they do what they're designed to do and they do it in the fastest, most destructive way imaginable. It really is one of those cases where finding the film wanting is likely due to coming to it with the wrong expectations, rather than any fault in Justin Lin's film itself. I feel the critical establishment has struggled with responding to the films ever since. Words like ludicrous, bonkers, and the like abound as critics continue their group attempt to rationalize poor dialogue and story logic with winning action sequences and exaggerated stunt work. It was easy to malign racing sports cars around Los Angeles as cheap low entertainment. Once the budgets rise and the scale expands, and the action begins to more closely resemble James Bond and Mission Impossible, Fast and Furious becomes more difficult to dismiss. So, on to Fast 5, after breaking Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel, from a prison transport, former FBI agent Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker, and Dom's sister Mia, AJordana Brewster, now join him on the run in South America. While holed up in Rio they take a robbery job to get some badly needed cash, only to wind up lied to and betrayed by the city's most powerful gangster, Joaquim de Almeida. While they plan their revenge against him, not to mention the biggest robbery of their lives, they also find themselves hunted down by a U.S. federal agent, Dwayne Johnson, sent to capture them. I'm rather fond of the late Paul Walker, who seems to be getting better and better with every installment. He started his career as one of those actors Hollywood seemed to be cramming down the audience's throat, whether we wanted to see Walker headlining a film or not. Now the Fast films have always been dominated by Vin Diesel, who continues to exert an enormous screen presence in each of them, but it's great to see Walker develop a more relaxed, naturalistic style as he goes. The supporting cast is about as large as the franchise has had thus far, and it cleverly drags back in characters from the previous 4 films and forms them into a single unified team. This is an outstanding development. One of the problems The Fast and the Furious had prior to the 5th film was its lack of focus or clear narrative line. There was the first film with Diesel and Walker, then the second with just Walker, then a third without either actor, bar a short cameo, and then a fourth reuniting them again. Here the leads are joined by Tyrese Gibson and Chris Ludacris Bridges from Too Fast Too Furious, Sung Kang from Tokyo Drift and Gal Gadot from Fast and Furious. It's a strong signal to the viewer, who's patiently watched through what had been a patchwork series of sequels. Now they all have a purpose and they all count for something. To be honest, it feels like this is the first installment to have a really strong grounding and a confident idea of what sort of franchise it wants to be. And it's a franchise that's rapidly evolving. The heavy reliance on street racing and car chases has been replaced by a fresh focus on general action and a heist narrative. Even the film's climatic chase, which is about as effective and gleefully entertaining a sequence as has appeared in the Fast movies, has a strong element of the heist genre to it, a sneaky theft, planned and carefully telegraphed, but then revealed to the audience like an impressive magic trick. There is street racing in Fast 5's story, but director Justin Lin doesn't bother to show it to us. There's no need. There's much more interesting stuff to watch elsewhere in the story. The film's Rio setting does wonders for its mise-en-scene, whether it's the downtown street scenes or the visual striking hillside slums. The location was used to great effect in Louis Leterrier's The Incredible Hulk, and to an extent it does feel as if Fast 5 is copying some of that film's early scenes, but it's still an interesting enough setting to be worth the theft. Finally, there's the introduce of Dwayne Johnson as Luke Hobbs, the no-nonsense and relentless federal agent sent to capture Toretto and O'Connor after it appears that they have murdered several DEA agents. He's clearly been hired to emulate Tommy Lee Jones' iconic Sam Gerard from The Fugitive, and to his credit Johnson takes on that responsibility with gusto. There are lines of dialogue he recites in this film that should have the writers cringing with embarrassment, yet he delivers them with such conviction and charisma that he manages to make them work. As a character he's a fine addition to the lineup, and in terms of progressing the story he gives the franchise a whole new direction. It would be easy to ignore the Fast films as throwaway entertainment, and it would be easy to do that because they are, but what outstanding throwaway entertainment they become from this point. With this film they've become the finely tuned machine that they spend so much time showcasing, an engine built for speed, energy, and to look good. On all 3 fronts, Fast 5 excels. If you have never bothered with the series, or if you watched the 2001 original and did not find it to your taste, this is the film to watch to give Toretto's gang another chance. This review was originally published at The Angriest on May 5, 2016 in a slightly different form. Here we go again. Another helping of fast cars, muscular bromance, and barely dressed women amassed for crowds of motorheads. Fast 5, the 5th entry in the Fast/Furious franchise, defies much. Preposterous action scenes defy the laws of physics. The franchise's increasing success rate defies Hollywood's trend of diminishing returns with each new sequel. The movie itself defies its predecessors by being watchable. Somehow, after several mind-numbing sequels, the filmmakers behind the series have managed to improve upon their formula and produce a reasonably enjoyable movie, easily the best the series has to offer. This is not to imply this is a good movie, merely the most entertaining in a succession of inexcusable trash. So what's new about this one that makes it different? Not much, that's for sure. They've just picked different cliches. Writer Chris Morgan and director Justin Lin, behind the camera since Tokyo Drift, retain an escalating degree of impossible car chases and stunts, this time not so obviously enhanced by CGI. The most significant change is that all the usual Fast/Furious elements are contained within a plot reminiscent of Ocean's 11, from the gathering of familiar faces for one big heist, straight down to the last-minute switcheroo. The scheme comes close to plagiarism. Instead of frivolous street races, although there are those, too, the movie revolves around the planning and execution of a major score. But within the limitations of making one franchise look like another, there's no end to the overlapping cliches. Dozens of action and heist movie lines like "now it's personal" and "this is a suicide mission" and "just this one last job" crop up throughout. Still, keeping it simple is probably for the best. We wouldn't want to confuse Paul Walker. In the pre-title sequence, ex-undercover cop Brian Walker and his sweetheart, Mia Jordana Brewster, organize a jailbreak for his best buddy Dominic, Vin Diesel. Wanted by the authorities, they escape to Rio and, before long, make enemies with your typical South American drug kingpin, Reyes, Joaquim de Almeida. Bent on getting back at Reyes for a double cross, they organize a crew, including the mouth Tyrese Gibson, the techie Chris Ludacris Bridges, the chameleon Sung Kang, the guns Gal Gadot, and the comic relief duo of Tego Calderon and Don Omar, to rob Reyes of $100 million in cash he's stashed in a police evidence safe. Meanwhile, DOM and company are tracked by an elite U.S. special agent named Hobbs, Dwayne Johnson, whose approach Brian describes as "wrath of God kind of stuff," a label that never lives up to its name. Delaying the inevitable, and disappointing, head-to-head fisticuffs between Diesel and The Rock, the latter sports a goatee so we can tell them apart, are disposable scenes of unintentionally funny character development to pad the movie's intolerable length. No one watching cares much about a pregnancy subplot or a budding romance between DOM and a local cop. The rest of the more than 2-hour runtime consists of dropping crumbs to a meticulous heist scenario, the specific details of which, in true Ocean style, we don't discover until it plays out on screen. Not that the eventual execution delivers any intelligent surprises. It involves driving a truck through police headquarters, latching the vault to 2 muscle cars via heavy cable, and dragging it through the streets of Rio. Anyone expecting subtlety over pure brashness forgot this movie makes the 4th sequel to 2001's The Fast and the Furious, stars an actor who changed his last name to Diesel, and features Walker's high school stage level of acting. Indeed, since there have been some comparisons between franchises in this review, try to balance Vin Diesel and Paul Walker against Ocean stars George Clooney and Brad Pitt, and when the talent scale tips toward the latter two, you understand why this franchise will never be more than just fodder for car enthusiasts. Fast 5 feels like a dumbed-down version of better movies, relying on its illogical but diverting action sequences to provide Y-chromosome brand entertainment. To be sure, moviegoers looking for something loud and brainless to kick off their summer movie season will no doubt enjoy this almost guaranteed commercial success, with brainless being the decisive qualifier. I have never seen a movie from the Fast and Furious franchise before the year 2011. Never. I never had the inclination to see any of these movies, despite the series being a consistent cash cow for producer Neal H. Moritz and Universal Studios for the past decade. One might begin to wonder what led me to see the franchise's 2011 entry, Fast 5. I might have to retract a little. I did see the first movie, 2001's The Fast and the Furious 4 years ago. Well, I only saw 2 or 3 minutes of one of the movie's early scenes on a large screen television at my local electronics store. But those 2 or 3 minutes did not convince me to go see Fast 5. The movie trailer did. When I first saw it, I had rolled my eyes in disgust at the idea of a 5th Fast and Furious movie. When I saw the trailer for a second time, it intrigued me. Because of this, I decided to end my ban on the franchise and see the movie. In order to understand the beginning of Fast 5, one would have to watch the past 4 movies, especially 2009's Fast and Furious. That movie featured law enforcement officer Brian O'Connor's reunion with the Toretto family, streetcar racer/thief Dominic DOM and his younger sister, Mia, after he had allowed DOM to escape arrest at the end of the first movie. DOM and Brian investigated the murder of the former's girlfriend, Leticia Letty Ortiz, and her connection to a major drug lord. Brian made arrangements with the FBI for Dom's release in exchange for the latter's assistance in the drug lord's capture. However, a federal judge reneged on the deal and sentenced Dom 25 years to life in prison. The movie ended with Brian, Mia, and two of Dom's colleagues, Tigo Leo and Rico Santos, attempting to free Dom from a bus en route to the Lompoc Penitentiary. Fast 5 picked up with Dom's rescue from the prison bus. Dom, Brian, and Mia are forced to leave the United States as fugitives from justice. Upon their arrival in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, they encounter Dom's former colleague, Vince. He recruits them to participate in steal cars from a moving train, on behalf of a Rio businessman and crime lord named Hernan Reyes. When Dom realizes that one of their fellow thieves, Zizi, is only interested in stealing one car, the Ford GT40, he has Mia steal the car, while Dom and Brian fight Zizi and his henchmen. The fight results in Zizi's murder of 3 DIA agents on board the train. The murders are pinned on Dom and Brian. The trio discover a computer chip from the Ford GT40 that consists of details of Reyes' criminal operation and locations of $100 million in cash. They decide to rip off the crime lord's money in order to start a new life, with the help of old friends. Dom, Brian, and Mia also discover that a die-hard USDSS agent named Luke Hobbs is in Brazil to capture them for the murders of the DIA agents. When Fast 5 first hit the theaters, many fans and critics declared it to be the best in the franchise. Following my first viewing of the movie, I watched the other 4 that came before it. 2 of them proved to be well-written entertainment, one of them seemed decent, but a little mediocre, and one barely maintained my interest. But Fast 5 definitely turned out to be better than the first 4 movies. Although the movie featured an extreme car chase through the streets of Rio, it barely touched upon streetcar racing, a theme that dominated the other 4 films. In fact, the movie only featured 2 streetcar races, a good-natured contest between 4 of the characters and another between Dom and Brian right before the movie's end credits. In other words, Fast 5 was more of a heist film. And although certain fans had complained about the limited emphasis on streetcar racing, the critics and other fans had expressed that the heist plot made Fast 5 the best in the franchise so far. Not only do I believe that Fast 5 is the best in the franchise, I feel that it is one of the better heist movies I have seen in recent years, aside from 2001's Ocean's 11 and 2007's Ocean's 13. Aside from a small quibble regarding the Vince character, screenwriter Chris Morgan's plot turned out to be a strong continuation of the first, second, and fourth films. Morgan's utilization of characters from the previous films provided Fast 5 with a strong ensemble cast. In fact, I happily noticed that none of supporting characters had been shoved into the background or overshadowed by the Dom, Brian, and Mia characters. Most of the supporting characters have previous connections with Dominic, except for 2, Roman Pierce and Tej Parker, who appeared in 2003's Too Fast Too Furious as Brian's friends. This 5th film provided a warm and humorous private reunion between the 3. And thanks to Morgan's script, the franchise's theme of family, especially fatherhood, resonated strongly. This theme also led me to view the Dominic/Brian friendship with a jaundiced eye. The movie's production also struck me as top-notch. Aside from the train robbery sequence, many of the exterior scenes were shot in Puerto Rico and Rio. Director Justin Lin and cinematographer Stephen F. Winden did a first-rate job in conveying the elegance, color, chaos, and squalor of Rio de Janeiro. I also have to commend Kelly Matsumoto, Fred Raskin, and Christian Wagner for their editing of the film, especially the foot chase through Rio's Rocinha favela, shantytown, and the chase sequence throughout the city. Before I end up gushing over the movie, I do have a few quibbles. The train heist had been shot in Arizona. And looked it? I am aware of the scrublands that exist in Brazil, but the train featured in this sequence looked as if it was traveling through a very stark and dry-looking terrain. And Morgan's script never revealed how Vince ended up in Brazil. He had last been seen in The Fast and Furious, being evacuated to hospital by a medevac, after being badly injured in truck heist gone wrong. Had he been convicted following his release from the hospital? How did he end up in Brazil in the first place? Considering the number of performers featured in the cast of Fast 5, I figured it would take a separate article to write about them. If I must be honest, there was not a performance that hit the wrong note. I noticed that the movie seemed to have a strong sense of ensemble acting. Not only did the gang of thieves summoned by Dominic and Brian clicked with perfect magic, but Dwayne Johnson and the other actors who portrayed the DSS agents clicked very well as a team. And I could say the same about Joaquim de Almeida as crime lord Reyes and Michael Irby as his henchman, Zizi. There were some performances that caught my eye. Vin Diesel and Paul Walker made an even stronger screen team, now that the latter's character, Brian O'Connor, officially became a criminal. And Walker's chemistry with AJordana Brewster seemed a lot stronger and more stable than it was in the first and fourth movies. Speaking of Walker, again, he was also able to recreate his strong chemistry with Tyrese Gibson, who portrayed his childhood friend Roman, from the second film, Too Fast Too Furious. As for Gibson, not only did he have the worst line in the movie, he also had most of the best ones. He was dynamic as ever. Chris Ludacris Bridges gave a deliciously cool and sardonic performance as Tej Parker. Spanish-born actress Elsa Pataky really connected with Diesel and Johnson in separate films. And it was great to see Almeida in a strong role again. I found his character's view on the differences between Spanish and Portuguese colonization rather interesting and chilling. Sung Kang, Han Solo, and Gal Gadot, Giselle Haribo's characters created a surprisingly sexy romance. Tigo Calderón and Don Omar made a hilarious screen team as Dom's old colleagues from the Dominican Republic. And even Dwayne Johnson gave a slightly scary take on the holy roller federal agent, Luke Hobbs. Considering how long this article is, one would assume that I really enjoyed Fast 5. And that person would be right. And I find this surprising, considering my initial contempt, when I first saw the movie's trailer. Not only did I really enjoy Fast 5, it became my favorite movie of the 2011 summer season. And it proved to be one of my favorite movies from that year. Fast 5 is the fifth and best produced, most exciting movie in the Fast and Furious series, bucking the trend of most sequels being worse than their predecessors. It's a popcorn classic that features wall-to-wall action but also manages to have characters with genuine emotions and performances that rise above the norm of most action fare. There's still too much foul language, however, and some problematic elements, but the Christian faith of Vin Diesel's kind-hearted rogue is presented more strongly than ever. In the story, federal agent Brian O'Connor frees Dominic Toretto from a harsh, unfair prison sentence by helping Dom's sister, Mia, break Dom out of a prison bus. Brian and Mia then show up in Rio de Janeiro at the doorstep of Dom's partner, Vince. Needing money, Brian and Mia agree to help Vince steal some cars seized by the DIA. They are being paid by a Rio crime lord named Reyes, whose gang shows up during the heist and kills the 3 DIA agents guarding the cars on a train headed north to America. Dom also shows up during the heist to help Brian, Mia, and Vince, but he suspects there's something else in one of the cars Reyes wants. So, he orders Mia to take the most suspect car to their hideout while he and Brian fight off the Reyes gang. A slam-bang, jaw-dropping stunt sequence follows, at the end of which, however, the gang captures Brian and Dom. Reyes has Dom and Brian tied up and threatens their lives, but Brian and Dom escape. Back at their hideout, they find out that the car they took from Reyes contains a computer chip detailing the schedule and location of all of the drug drops of Reyes and his gang. Now, however, a special team of American agents, led by Luke Hobbs, a tough hombre played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, arrives in Rio. Hobbs thinks Brian and Dom killed the DIA agents, and he's all set to take them dead or alive. In order to escape this new problem, Dom, Mia, and Brian decide to take down the Reyes gang and steal all their money. They figure that, with all that money, they can evade capture forever, especially if they go to countries with no extradition treaties with the United States. Of course, this scheme proves easier planned than done. While Fast 5 asks audiences to root for a gang on the lam for breaking someone out of prison, it's still a movie that's undeniably fun and unbelievably fast-paced. As noted, the characters and the performances driving them have an extra level of soul and emotion that are above the norm for the genre, and that translates into a strong message in which family comes ahead of money, even for these criminals on the wrong side of the law. At one point, the sister reveals she's pregnant, but this is seen as a joyous occasion, where family is expanded rather than a burden as some movies might do. However, she and the movie's other lead hero seem to remain unmarried even at the end. Despite this problem, Fast 5 is laced with overtly positive Christian moments, including 3 dramatic shots of the giant Jesus statue overlooking Rio. Also, DOM prays the sign of the cross over a friend and clearly calls for a character to say grace before a meal. In addition, DOM speaks positively about his late father, describing him as a church-going man who made the family attend church every Sunday and who was happy to feed other neighborhood people as long as they went to church. In the end, he looks happily up at heaven as he prepares to give a lot of the heist money to the widow of his dead friend to help raise her child. He also allows Brian to win a car race in the middle of the movie so that Brian and his sister will have an extra $1 million to raise his child with. While the gang keeps much of the loot, they are out to destroy the crime kingpin and set average poor people free from the kingpin's tyranny. Another remarkable scene involves the federal agent Hobbs in danger of being killed by the Reyes gang members after he captures DOM, Brian, and Mia, but they return to save him from certain death. This leads to a reconciliation of sorts between Hobbs and DOM and an allegiance to bring down the crime kingpin. Fast 5, the fittingly titled fifth film in the Fast and Furious franchise, begins where its predecessor left off, a high-stakes, improbable breakout of Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel, by his best friend Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker, and sister Mia, AJordana Brewster. Following this successful bus flipping, Brian and Mia go into hiding, proving that they are now full-blown, no-remorse criminals. There is a noticeable shift in quality between Fast 5 and its 4 predecessors. Shots look crisper. Action sequences have more electric pacing. They finally quit the one drag race per act scheme. That's right, it's no longer about low-time drug runners and in the shadows race crews. Fast 5 is about car-based heists in the name of pride and family. The set pieces in Fast 5 are impressive and endlessly entertaining. The train heist, with Walker hanging off the side of a truck which is hanging off the side of a train that is hurtling toward a bridge. The favela chase sequence over rooftops, with hulking men in muscle tees jumping through windows tackling one another. The chase sequence in which 2 cars have a giant safe cabled to the back bumpers, smashing erratically against every guardrail and car in sight. If The Fast and the Furious is the meathead soap opera, then this is its prime-time facelift. The characters keep their single-minded melodrama pursuit of family at all costs, but they have a heretofore unseen chemistry. Each character is a cog in a well-oiled machine of grumbling one-upsmanship and ball-busting humor that may or may not be wholly self-aware of its own adolescence. It may sound like a joke, but the 5th installment of The Fast and the Furious is the entry point to the series. Watching the first does not properly introduce one into the phenomenon that is the F and the F. The sloppiness of tone that is in the first 4 films falls away with Fast 5. There is still some earnestness in how the characters proceed, but the film makes no aim at presenting a serious narrative. Instead, this action film is one that ignores the preconceived notions of the genre. It knows that it has the successful brand name behind it, so it proceeds as if it has everybody on board from the get-go. Just as Diesel's DOM becomes closer to invincible with every film, the Fast and the Furious franchise gives itself the right to succeed through its unabashed confidence in itself. Fast 5 has the same guilty pleasure capabilities of a Roadhouse or a Commando. It transcends rational thinking. It is enjoyable for its blatant, inherent flaws. It's just damn good. I don't think you can take 2 mid-size sedans, chain them to a bank vault and haul it behind you on a high-speed chase through the streets of Rio de Janeiro while being chased by the cops. I think the traffic would be too bad. I also don't think you can steal cars from a speeding train by driving a truck beside the tracks, cutting the side out of a freight car with an acetylene torch, flipping the cars onto the truck bed, tilting the bed, letting them roll to the ground and then driving them away. I think there are more practical ways to steal cars. I also think that while Houdini might have been able to make a bank vault disappear from the stage of the New York Hippodrome, and escape from it in the process, bank vaults in general tend to be hard to mess with, as may occur to you during Fast 5. But you know what? It sort of doesn't matter. The movie is made of sheer, preposterous, and non-stop impossible action, muscular macho guys, hot chicks, and platoons of bad guys who are eliminated by the dozens while the leading characters escape certain death so easily, it gets to be a habit. This is the third of the Fast and the Furious series starring Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, and Jordana Brewster, and here they're joined by Dwayne Johnson, making it a sort of convention of reckless drivers. Apparently some of these characters have had, in the past, long conversations about their goals, dreams, abilities, and values, saving time at the present for terse verbal shorthand. When you hear as many as 6 words in a row, you suspect it's a tagline for a trailer, "We need to assemble a team." Justin Lin is emerging as a first-rate director in this second-rate genre, having shelved, temporarily I trust, the ambition suggested in his remarkable Better Luck Tomorrow, 2002. Unlike a certain other maker of Crash Crash Bang Bangs, whose name I trust you to summon effortlessly, he devotes attention to a storyline that devises ingenious new things to do instead of obsessively blowing up things. He storyboards his impossible action sequences, instead of editing them with incomprehensible speed. And he hauls in fresh faces, played by such as Tyrese Gibson, Chris Ludacris Bridges, Matt Schultz, Sung Kang, Gal Gadot, Elsa Pataki, and Joaquim de Almeida, gives them a specialty and a chance to demonstrate it. You couldn't say the supporting characters are developed beyond their defining labels, but at least they're in the mix. The villain, de Almeida, a Rio drug kingpin, makes the usual error of ordering his flunkies into hot pursuit and then following them into danger. There's a reason generals don't fight in the trenches. His character, Reyes, is set up as a criminal tycoon, but $10 million is not, after all, very much drug money to have in a bank, not when Wachovia Bank was recently revealed to have laundered drug money equal to a third of the Mexican GNP. One thing you know is that the US law authorities will spend less time trying to put those bankers behind bars than the Brazilians do here, and lose many fewer squad cars in the process. But facts will get me nowhere in reviewing a movie of this sort. What you want is advice about your genre expectations. The 2001 movie was sort of fun with its energy and ambition, placing Diesel and Walker in a Los Angeles street racing story. The 2009 film, which made an impenetrable leap from the plot of the first one, was much more routine. Both made plenty of money. The F&F titles got confusing with the unrelated Fast and Furious, Tokyo Drift and John Singleton's Too Fast Too Furious, which is why, I suppose Fast 5 drops the Furious. But it isn't technically the fifth F&F unless you count the outliers. So I don't know what 5 refers to. That doesn't bother me. What it all comes down to is a skillfully assembled 130 minutes at the movies, with actors capable of doing absurd things with straight faces, and action sequences that toy idly with the laws of physics. That can be amusing for some people, not so much for me. What I missed were laughs, although I got a good one right at the end, when we were warned that the driving in the movie was done in a controlled environment by professionals, and we shouldn't try those stunts ourselves. Someday I would like to meet a driver who was planning to race his Hummer into a reinforced concrete wall before being persuaded otherwise by the closing credits. Where have all the cowboys gone, anyway? I've gotten behind most of the Fast and Furious movies because with the exception of the appalling Tokyo Drift they've been packed with thrillingly staged action and peopled with protagonists who walk that bad boy line cagily enough to make rooting for them a guilty pleasure, but a pleasure nonetheless. But something is off in Fast 5, aka Fast and Furious 5, Rio Heist aka 5 AST and 5 Urias, and someone please make it stop. The mix is wrong. It's all teetered far too far into the realm of the actively antisocial. There's something deeply unpleasant about this latest flick that prevented me from enjoying all the stuff blowing up real good. I also was unable to enjoy all the man-meat on display. But then, none of the beefcake here was ever to my taste, so I suppose I cannot blame this particular movie for that. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm getting too old for this shit. Maybe I'm tired of seeing people who do bad championed as heroes merely because the bad they do isn't that bad. Or maybe the only place left for the Furious franchise to go was here. I started getting rubbed the wrong way, and let me tell ya, that's really uncomfortable at the film's opening gambit, in which former cop, former FBI agent, and current criminal Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker, Takers, Flags of Our Fathers, and his main squeeze, AJordana Brewster, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Beginning, Annapolis, bust her brother and Brian's pal Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel, Babylon AD, find me guilty, off a prison bus, after he's been sent up for 25 years to life with no possibility of parole. If I'm remembering my Fast and Furious correctly, and I believe I am, it's not like he doesn't deserve it. It's not like Dom is wrongly convicted or anything. He's just, I dunno, too cool for prison? He is Vin Diesel, after all, and any man named after a varietal of automobile fuel has gotta be awesome. Right? So hey. Never mind. It's all good. Chris Morgan's Wanted cellular script delights in letting us know that, despite the horrificness of the prison bus crash that director Justin Lin, Annapolis, Better Luck Tomorrow, stages for our viewing pleasure, there were no fatalities. Hurrah! But 5AST5IVA, the violence to the English language is perhaps appropriate when seen in context, won't let it go. So I'm thinking the too sexy for my responsibility to my fellow humans thing is probably intentional. 'Cause what happens next really bothers me. See, Brian and Mia end up down in Rio de Janeiro, which is where it's at these days, apparently, where they hook up with Dom and some other pals from the old neighborhood and decide to do a job heisting fancy schmancy sports cars from a moving train. Oh yes, the racing alongside a moving train and busting in which blowtorches and whatnot is all very exciting, I'm sure. But there comes a moment when Dom is about to make his escape, with the most special car in the batch, natch, and in run a couple cops bent on stopping this heist. Dom is cornered, he is absolutely, most definitely caught, except then one of the bad guys with whom Dom et al. Are working shoots the cops dead. And now good bad guy Dom can make his escape. This becomes a thing throughout the rest of the film, when super badass cop Hobbs, Dwayne Johnson, the other guys, Tooth Fairy, pumped up to a terrifying degree, arrives on scene to bring in Dom and Brian and Mia, all now tops of the most wanted list after their bus escapade, and also because now Dom has killed cops. See, local cop Elena, Elsa Pataki, snakes on a plane, Hobbs translator, becomes convinced that Dom cannot possibly be that bad that he would shoot cops, and she's not wrong, Dom is indeed not that bad. But the movie needed to have those cops taken out if Dom was to continue as a character in the narrative, and the movie chickens out when it allows Dom to benefit from the deaths of those cops while also allowing him the golden badge of not that bad for not having actually shot them himself. That sourness lingers over the rest of the film. At least for me. But it does seem as if the rest of the film would have fallen on its face anyway, out of sheer laziness. Your ass is already in the seat, so who cares if the film skips over most of the actual street racing that made the first movies so ridiculously exciting? Who cares if, in its place, we get a shoddy Ocean's 11 heist knockoff, the kind in which someone says things like, "We need a bisexual Martian who can pick locks and do improv," and then someone else says, "I know a guy," and then those requested talents never get used. Who cares if the Robin Hood aspect, the gang is heisting a drug dealer's millions, gets lost in a level of civic destruction that would make Michael Bay blush, and would probably negate whatever societal benefit would come from bringing down a powerful drug lord. Imagine Robin Hood nuking Nottingham Castle after tweaking the sheriff, and you've got the overall impact of Fast 5 in one. Who cares if the unintentional subtextual homoeroticism makes you roll your eyes and just wish that The Rock and Vin Diesel would just fuck already and get over it? This might be the worst thing, thematically speaking, in a movie that revels in its own soullessness. The big moment of triumph comes when Dom doesn't kill a federal officer just to watch him die, after we've spent the whole movie supposedly in his thrall because he's absolutely, definitely not the kind of man who would do such a thing. What's heroic about any explanation for such a storytelling gambit? You are getting a free preview of a Time magazine article from our archive. Many of our articles are reserved for subscribers only. Want access to more subscriber-only content? Click here to subscribe. Toward the start of Fast 5, fifth and best in the series that began with The Fast and the Furious in 2001, Brian, Paul Walker, is in a freight train and Dom, Vin Diesel, is steering a 1966 Corvette Grand Sport alongside it. At the last possible moment before the train goes through a bridge over a river, Brian jumps from the train and lands on the Corvette, which Dom then drives off a, million-foot cliff. As the car plummets down the ravine, our guys jump out and land safely in the water. Toward the end of Fast 5, Dom and Brian and their gang have pulled the ultimate bank vault heist. Instead of breaking into the vault, which holds like a quillion dollars in drug money, they hijack it by yanking it from its moorings with heavy cables attached to 2 police cars the guys have stolen. With half of the actual Rio police force in pursuit, they pull the giant piggy bank through street traffic, totaling nearly every other car in their way and creating collateral damage on a near holocaustal scale, as if the Brazilian beach resort were Tokyo in a 50s monster movie, and the vault were Godzilla. In a film that is sure to blast open the box office vault this weekend, these 2 amazing chase scenes provide a little epiphany about modern movies. It's this, in the kind of picture Hollywood makes best, the old cinema verity's sharp dialogue, rounded characters, subtle acting, a certain camera eloquence are irrelevant. In a movie like Fast 5, the screenwriter, Chris Thompson, is less important than the stunt writer, who dreams up action sequences of a dazzling complexity, and the director, Justin Lin, matters less than the second unit director, who brings those destructo fantasies to thrilling kinetic life. In Fast 5, everything's in a hurry, even the English language subtitles for the Portuguese dialogue scoot onto and off the screen. The film's makers know that action is the one essential in this, the post-human era of movies. Honestly, that's fine. Throughout its 100-plus year history, cinema has added some elements, jettisoned others, and what is lost is soon forgotten. When talking pictures arrived, silent movie fans decried the chattering and missed the mighty Wurlitzer organ, but few do today. The switch to color disappointed all those who loved the pearly tones of black and white, but nobody wants Avatar or Inception in monochrome. Into the dustbin of film history you may now throw characters worth caring about. What you're left with is cars that career and crash. The new is, of course, old. The essential properties of the medium are movement and collision, and, from its infancy, history's first fully mechanical art form offered its astonished spectators motion pictures of other machines. In 1896 the Lumiere brothers showed a short film of a train pulling into a French railway station. The sight panicked its viewers, who thought the train would come off the screen and run them over. In 1903 came the epical heist of Edwin S. Porter's The Great Train Robbery in 1903, and, beginning in 1912, the auto carnage of Mack Sennett's Keystone Cops, speeding down the streets of a new metropolis known as Los Angeles. A century later, the most popular movies, the Iron Man and Transformers series, celebrate other machines. But Fast 5 goes back to basics with another train robbery, and vehicular violence in police vehicles on city streets just souped up and stripped down like a stock car in a death race. Post-human action movies, like films from any other genre, can be crap. But when they work, they stoke an exhilaration that obviates the need for sensitive characters. Fast Five's characters are no more realistic than creatures in a video game, each figure has one defining trait, tops. Dom is a curd, righteous slab of meat, Brian is the more cautious yang to Dom's yin, Mia, AJordana Brewster, Brian's girlfriend and Dom's sister, is there to be pretty and get in trouble or, here, pregnant. The other members of the gang Dom has assembled for the Vault Caper. All veterans of previous Fast and Furious episodes have some special skill, what they do is who they are. By mid-movie the number of familiar faces, for the record, Tyrese Gibson, Chris Ludacris Bridges, Matt Schultz, Sung Kang, Gal Gadot, Tego Calderon, and Don Omar, has added up to 10, just one short of the team in Ocean's 11, whose plot ingenuity Fast 5 both mimics and easily surpasses. For a glimpse of the 11th member, stick around through the closing credits, where Eva Mendes, from Too Fast Too Furious, makes a brief appearance and reveals yet another mystery guest, thought to be dead, thus setting up a 6th and possibly 7th installment. To justify its destruction of a major city, 5 insists that the movie's chief drug lord villain, Joaquim de Almeida, controls virtually the entire police force and hundreds of favela. But the series also mainlines new blood by introducing 2 adversaries on the right side of the law, Hobbs, Dwayne Johnson, a DEA officer who's chased Dom and Brian down to Rio, and Elena, Elsa Pataki, the one honest local cop. Pataki, a winsome presence, will move into the Dom's girlfriend slot vacated by Michelle Rodriguez at the end of the last film, Fast and Furious. And Johnson, an even more impressive cut of beefcake than Diesel, is destined to wrestle Dom in an Ultimate Fighting Championship bout, which slows things down a little in the later reels, but, hey, didn't Alien have to battle Predator? He also gets his own hairstylist, a neat trick, since like Diesel he sports a shaved head and, in this PG-13 film, sole use of the F-word. Both new stars fit in fine, expect them to make return visits. Fast 5 occasionally wades into crime film cliches, like the bad guy sharpshooters whose bullets hit only the supporting players. And just to let Diesel and Walker pretend they're actors, the director gives them a scene where Dom and Brian reminisce soggily about their respective dads. It plays like product placement for the Fatherhood Council and should come with a title card reading popcorn break. Environmentalists could also complain that Fast 5, which spills more fuel than BP in the Gulf of Mexico, is the least green movie ever. But these are minor lapses in a movie with exploding toilets, cars that move sideways, and a big chase sequence with Walker and Brewster fleeing favela goons by crashing through the tin roofs of shantytown shacks. There's also a helpful how-to in getting a mob boss's handprint for Vault ID, dress the luscious Gadot in a skimpy swimsuit and have her walk her past the boss. He'll naturally pat her butt, and she'll have the print on her bikini bottom. The movie is full of such moments of low genius. That's why Hollywood's young male audience, which has been boycotting movies for the last few months, will show up in droves for Fast 5 and go back in droves. The promise in the ads "Summer begins April 29" is no idle boast. The picture delivers the high-octane, testosteronic goods of a warm-weather smash, and maybe the first great film of the post-human era. It's just a shame that every theater showing this non-stop auto race, this animated cartoon, can't be a drive-in. Author's note: I no longer endorse this review, and certainly not its final score, but I leave it in place for now until such time as I'm able to write a replacement. Whatever pretext undergirds the Fast and the Furious series, it has finally been snuffed out by Fast 5, which is not really a film about street racing, nor even a film about street racing as a secret method of fighting crime, but which is, as plenty of people have already pointed out, Ocean's 11 in cars. Except for the in cars part, fact is, it's kind of startling how much this 5th entry has managed to relegate the high-speed autoerotica that has been till now the chief reason for the franchise to exist to the back burner. So it's basically just Ocean's 11 with Vin Diesel. I am certain that there exist in this world folks who think that going from George Clooney to Vin Diesel is a trade-up. You are welcome to go read their blogs, if that's how you swing. Taking off from the very same moment that the last film, Fast and Furious, ended, which you had best remember, and if like me you don't, then your host, for this film jumps right into the mythology of a series that has grown insupportably complex given that even the damn titles out and out tell us that cars am shiny. Is the reason to give the films your attention. Fast 5 first demonstrates how former LAPD cop and FBI agent Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker, and his lady friend Mia Toretto, Jordan Brewster, rescue Mia's brother and Brian's BFF Dominic, Vin Diesel, from a prison bus, using their cars. But only using their cars for a few seconds, for whereas the previous entries in the series have opened with long, lingering car-based action set pieces, Fast 5 just shows us a quick clip of a car tripping the bus, for want of a better phrase, and then rotates as quickly as possible into the plot, because Jesus Christ, opening your car movie with a long car sequence would just be garish. I'm just giving Fast 5 a hard time. In fact, it is readily the best film in the franchise since the very first, The Fast and the Furious of 2001, though it speaks to the quality of this massively popular series that the second best entry could be something as frequently bad, and as peculiarly overpraised, as Fast 5, which gets points merely for being as moronic as Too Fast Too Furious, though I will forgive that title nearly everything, as muddled as Fast and Furious, or as flat-out pointless as The Fast and the Furious, in Tokyo. Now for some reason. In Fast 5, there is at least a sense that the characters are characters, the plot is mostly easy to follow, and by adding The Rock Dwayne Johnson to the cast, as implacable federal bulldog Hobbs, the film even manages for the first time to create a worthy antagonist, though the actual bad guy is still a refugee from a Jean-Claude Van Damme picture in the 1980s, conniving Rio drug lord Reyes, Joaquim de Almeida, who has fucked over DOM and company, leading our heroes to concoct a bitchin' scheme to rob all 10 of his cash houses, stealing $100 million in the blink of an eye and leaving Reyes broke and unable to control Rio de Janeiro with his dastardly plan to give electricity, clean water, and good schools to the favelas. This scheme involves recruiting people with very specific skills, most of whom we've seen in one episode of the series or another, that this includes a slick-talking black man, Tyrese Gibson, and an easily agitated techie black man, Chris Bridges, ludicrous to you and me, and a pair of brothers who can't stop bickering with each other long enough to do the job, Tigo Calderone and Don Omar, is no doubt a total coincidence. I can only suppose that writer Chris Morgan skimped on the crusty Jewish conman solely because there's no C-list version of Carl Reiner. At any rate, the joy of any caper film lies in watching the cogs get mounted one at a time, and then watching as the whole damn machine begins a-cranking, and this pleasure is surely given to us in Fast 5, though director Justin Lin and his army of editors are perhaps overworried that we'll lose patience if the film spends too much time lingering on the details of its plot, and accordingly put the whole thing together in a fidgety, nervous manner that serves on the one hand to make everything the most goddamn exciting, thrilling thing you have ever motherfucking seen, and on the other to make Fast 5 seem a wee smidgen over-caffeinated. Occasionally, though not frequently enough, something awesome happens, a pretty damn cool train robbery that kicks things off, a foot race through a suspiciously clean favela, various fisticuffs and shootouts, including one in which Diesel and The Rock punch each other, The Rock very nicely wearing a Van Dyke beard so that we can quickly tell which of the hypertrophically muscular, bald men with olive skin is which. Not very many of these involve cars, and at a couple of points the movie almost seems mean about it, showing us the minutes right immediately before a street race. Before it became a series of globe-trotting crime epics, this was actually a series about street racing, you might recall, but not the race itself. Not to mention, plenty of the action that happens is that particularly destructive, but totally sterile PG-13 kind of action, where the collateral damage must be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars and the tens of dead bodies, but since it's all kept neatly off-screen, we're not meant to reflect on the fact that our heroes are culpable for a shitload of devastation. So for a while, the film is sort of antsy-making, anchored largely by Diesel's inordinately grave presence, and The Rock's "I am a fuck you up" crazy eyes and sweat and screwball line deliveries, and Stephen F. Wyndon's shabby chic cinematography, and the profound sense that a lot of what we're seeing is all real, weighty physical stunts without the stink of CGI. Then it all comes together in a miraculous final sequence, in which two cars are dragging a multi-ton bank vault down the streets of Rio as several dozen cops offer pursuit, a ludicrous, physics-defying gag that goes on and is everything the series has always meant to be, unmitigated vehicle stunt porn, with a healthy dose of that can't possibly happen pixie dust on it, and it even manages to work nicely into the requisite sleight of hand of any decent caper film. I'll own up to fairly much loving the sequence. It is slick and hollow, but so very delightful to watch, popcorn movie stupidity at its finest. It almost makes the ticket price worthwhile, though coming as it does after a very long movie, there is no reason on this earth or any other for Fast 5 to be 130 minutes, not when the half hour that could be shaved off is so transparently padding, and after a hell of a lot of staring at Paul Walker's empty face, it's not the same as saying that Fast 5 itself is a good fun dumb action movie. It's a bit of a grind, in fact, with its soul-saving grace that it ends right at the second it's done giving 110%, so you leave feeling sated. I gotta be honest, it worked. When the inevitable F6ST, or whatever it ends up being titled, comes out, I will probably be eager for it, remembering only the big-ass final chase scene and not the hour and 3/4 of frequent tedium that preceded it. This is both the blessing and the curse of enthusiastically frivolous action movies. Their joys are so giddily effervescent that you can forget how fast they fizz out. Where do you even begin? Let's go with the title, Fast 5. This is the fifth film in a franchise that started in 2001 with The Fast and the Furious, and the first sequel's cutesy Too Fast Too Furious has nothing on the way the series makers seem to have given up coming up with anything original. Fast 5 is what you would call the film casually, tossing it around with fellow viewers, though it feels more like shorthand that cropped up in the production offices and somehow stuck. It's choppy and ugly, and it betrays a total lack of effort on the part of the filmmakers to win over anyone who isn't in the series' crowd of enthusiasts and hangers-on. It's a nickname made official. This is the problem that runs throughout Fast 5, its utter lack of ideas. The bulk of the film is set in Rio de Janeiro, and there are 3 separate shots throughout the film sweeping up the hill behind the Christ the Redeemer statue and looking down to the city below. These are not instances of repeated footage. These are separate filmed events, all showing the same basic location, done with the same doubling sweep familiar from, well, earlier in this very film. Director Justin Lin is unable to come up with enough separate images to make a full feature, and instead starts repeating himself before the end credits. That's Fast 5, caught up in a feedback loop, enamored of trite design, and nostalgic for its own existence. The universe of Fast 5 thrives on contradictions, though there have been 4 films before this one, only 3 of those feature characters related to the story told here, and none is required viewing to understand what goes on. The characters are constantly chasing money through drug deals and hijackings, yet they're forever broke and forced to pull that one last job that will clear their names or give them pocket money for life. It's a little like James Bond, things keep happening, but nothing ever changes. The screenplay from Chris Morgan, who wrote the previous 2 films and Wanted, for which he's still on the hook as far as society is concerned, features a brief recap of the final moments of Fast and Furious, the 4th film, which ended with Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel, being sentenced to hard time and his friends, including Sister Mia, AJordana Brewster, and Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker, using stunt cars to bust him out of the prison convoy. Brian began the series as a cop, only to become an outlaw when he befriended Dominic while working undercover. Then he got back in the good graces of the law and became an FBI agent, only to help out Dom and chuck his career again. By now, he's a committed crook out of loyalty to Dom, who gave him his start, and Mia, his girlfriend. Fast 5 is a straight-up heist flick, but it would be wrong to classify this as a change for the series. They've almost always been about major thefts and cons, just ones done using street racers. Down in Rio and running from the law, Brian, Mia, and DOM meet up with Vince, Matt Schultz, a compatriot from the first film, who hooks them up with a job stealing cars that turn out to be marked by the DIA and wanted by their original owner, a local drug kingpin named Reyes, Joaquim de Almeida. The job with Reyes' men goes south, and a few DIA agents are killed, which calls down the thunder from the states in the form of Agent Hobbs, Dwayne Johnson, née The Rock, who chases after the FBI's most wanted and whose physical proportions straddle the line between gargantuan and cartoonish. Once Hobbs hits town, it's a pretty standard story, as Dom's crew recruits old friends from previous movies to steal Reyes' $100 million in drug money riches to start a new life while they also try to stay a step ahead of Hobbs. Lin's style is nothing if not familiar. This is his third straight film in the franchise to direct, and he, with cinematographer Stephen F. Winden, definitely has a certain number of stylistic and emotional beats he wants to hit. Wide establishing shots are done by circling around an object with panning the opposite direction. Fight scenes are filmed with a dizzying number of cuts that still don't quite mask the fact that the characters rearrange themselves within the room's geography with each edit. Action scenes are presented with tweaked frame rates that create a choppy look that owes more to a general prevailing vibe than any one storyteller's desire to imbue movement with tone, etc., etc. The best action sequence comes early on, with various enemies chasing DOM, Brian, and Mia across the rooftops of a Brazilian favela, soaring from house to house with a kineticism and freedom that's breathtaking. It's one of the few times Lin actually lets us feel what's happening in the film's world instead of just observing its hyper-edited effects. A sense of place gives you movement and energy, a clutter of images does the opposite. Lin is so enamored of assembly line filmmaking that he forgets to make any part of Fast 5 feel like anything other than an unwarranted entry in a series that should have ended already. Lin was an almost inspired choice to helm the first season finale to NBC's Community, which used a paintball game to send up action cliches, but his work on that show soared by mocking its own inanity. Here, he actually means it, which is far more problematic. The cast does have its moments of humor and ease, though. Walker is almost criminally charming, and he's actually able to bring a humanoid smile to Diesel's face when they're pawing around and stealing cars as they plan their heist. The supporting players are likable, too, particularly Tyrese Gibson as a fast-talking driver and thief and Chris Ludacris Bridges as the resident safecracker. There are times when they're all able to come together and just coast on their mutual chemistry, and it's these scenes that work the best, since they're the most like the actual enjoyable heist films Fast 5 wants so badly to be. But soon enough, the camaraderie is over, and Dom's talking in greeting card banalities about life and freedom, and he's doing so with all the passion of a child struggling with a summer reading assignment. It's true enough that this is an action film, and that performances in the genre are not typically expected to be life-changing or resonant, but it's not too much to ask for the actors to act. It is, after all, their job. Then again, there's a degree to which some of the plastic performances are fitting, given the fact that they abut a series of set pieces that rely more and more on computer-generated objects and ideas. When Lin uses real cars and actual objects, the stunt scenes look amazing, but when he reverts to CGI, the film stalls out. The visceral thrill of physical action is almost impossible to replicate digitally, and parts of the film feel dead on arrival. Most curious of all, for an action franchise that revolves around car races and chases, Lin rarely delivers the goods. There's a four-man drag later in the film in which Brian, DOM, and a couple other cons race each other for the fun of it, but other races are left entirely to the viewer's imagination. At one point, Brian and DOM take to the streets of Rio to find racers and challenge them to heads-up matches to try and win new vehicles for their robbery scheme, a setup that seems beautifully teed up to allow Lin to mix the series' trademark racing tone with its broader heist/action leanings. But we never see the races. After a few traded barbs and some typical bravado, the film cuts to the aftermath to show DOM and Brian arriving at home with their trophies. Lin, bizarrely, seems to have forgotten that the fast cars and speed-based thrills are kind of this whole movie series' MO, and that without them it becomes just another franchise. He's made a racing movie with no races, an action movie that trades physical thrills for computer-generated toys, and a narrative film that plays like an ad. Fast. On occasion. Furious. Not a chance. Daniel Carlson is the managing editor of Pajiba and a member of the Houston Film Critics Society and the Online Film Critics Society. He's also a TV blogger for the Houston Press. You can visit his blog, Slowly Going Bald. There's a running theory in my house that The Rock, also known as Dwayne Johnson, sorry buddy, but you'll always be The Rock to me, and Vin Diesel are actually the same being. Like they're different versions of the same dude from parallel dimensions, or some sci-fi trope like that. They make similar movies. Couldn't you imagine Diesel playing the protagonist in Faster, or The Rock with silly-looking sunglasses bouncing around space in the Riddick movies? Even the children's films they do, like The Pacifier, Diesel, and The Tooth Fairy, Rock, could have gone either way. Now before you get your panties in all twisted in a fit of rage and start bombarding the comment section with snarky notes about how I'm obviously a dumbass who has never seen a movie before, I'm just trying to say that I imagine that there are a lot of casting lists in Hollywood with these guys in spots 1 and 2, that's all. The latest installment of the Fast/Furious franchise, Fast 5, perhaps the fastest and most furious thus far in the series, finally brings these two well-muscled action stars together. I was a bit concerned that as soon as they met on screen that some sort of rupture would appear in the very fabric of our universe, because, as we all know, two versions of the same person from different planes of existence cannot simultaneously occupy the same space. That's elementary science fiction. Sorry, I've been watching a lot of Fringe lately, but putting Diesel and The Rock together in a single movie is a bit of a mind-blowing proposition. Going in, I wasn't sure a single celluloid frame could handle that much man beef. And not only does Fast 5 bring these two meaty juggernauts together, but it is also a reunion of almost every memorable character from the first 4 films. With the notable exceptions of Michelle Rodriguez and Lucas Black, the cast features Dom Toretto, Diesel, Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker, Mia Toretto, AJordana Brewster, Roman, Tyrese Gibson, Tej, Ludacris, Giselle, Gal Gadot, Leo, Tego Calderon, Santos, Don Omar, and Vince, Matt Schultz. There's even a "we need to put together a crew team assembly" montage. It's a good time, especially if you're already a fan. Fast 5 opens with Dom, recently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So of course, Brian and Mia break him out in a daring high-speed chase where Brian basically trips a bus. Think about how you would stick your leg out and trip someone, and that's pretty much what he does, only to a bus, which makes it rad. The trio, now headline-making fugitives, flee to Rio de Janeiro, where Vince lives. Mia finds out she's pregnant. Don't babies always fuck things up? They all go on a job that turns bad, and run afoul of Rio's biggest crime lord, Joaquin de Almeida. Not only that, but Hobbs, The Rock, the biggest, baddest, most cliché-spouting federal agent ever, is also hot on their tail. Seriously, Hobbs pretty much just yells lines that Tommy Lee Jones said in The Fugitive. He spends every second in the middle of a roid rage meltdown, sweaty, twitchy, and about to explode, his biceps all over the place. At one point he also says that his team had better be wearing their thunderwear, so there's that. Amidst all of this, our anti-heroes have to try to figure out how to steal $100 million so they can all retire in style and freedom. The story of Fast 5 is stupid, but it's the best kind of stupid, and story's not why you dragged your ass all the way to the theater, is it? You want to see cars driving, guns firing, brawny giants fighting, chase scenes galore, and if a couple of ass shots happen to find their way into the film, that doesn't hurt the situation any. That's the foundation the Fast and Furious franchise is built upon. The only chink in the otherwise gloriously absurd armor of Fast 5 is that this time around the producers tried to make a heist film instead of a straight-up action film. The pace definitely falters when it tries to be clever, it's not, and there is a bait-and-switch move that is straight out of one of the Ocean's movies. But this isn't much of an issue, because Fast 5 never takes itself too seriously, and even when it does get melodramatic and emotional, like when Dom and a sexy Brazilian cop bond for a moment over dead loved ones, those moments are so asinine and cheesy that you can't help but laugh your ass off. At times Fast 5 spends too much time building up, and you think the payoff can't possibly be worth it, but Ramon says things like how his share of the score will mean a lot of vaginal activity, so even when it gets slow, it's never boring. By the time you get to the big climactic scene, you're ready for an epic chase, and you will not be let down. You haven't seen cinematic mayhem and destruction since Bad Boys 2. Fast 5 wrecks half of Rio in magnificently over-the-top fashion, and, if you go in expecting a movie that is both ridiculous and ridiculously entertaining, you shouldn't be disappointed. This is the kind of movie where they throw two grenades at you, because one grenade is never enough. Car chases in movies may be tricky to film, but they're almost guaranteed to thrill. Nevertheless, with a few notable exceptions, they lose their effect if they go on for too long. Build a whole film around car chases and you need really good ideas to make it work. Build 4 films around the same theme and you'll find that you're reaching the end of the road. Given this, fans had every reason to expect that this 5th installment in the Fast and Furious franchise would be a disappointment. They're in for a pleasant surprise. A more complex plot, solid character development and some fantastic set pieces make this one a winner. It opens with Dominic Toretto, in Diesel, on a prison bus on his way to serve a life sentence. Up come his sister and her boyfriend in their fast cars. How to get him out? Simple. Roll the bus over a few times. Amazingly, there were no fatalities, all prisoners have been accounted for except one, say the rolling news reports that follow. It's a suitably incredulous, a team-style touch, assuring us that we are about to watch a series of incredibly dangerous and silly activities, but no passers-by will get hurt. It gives our heroes a sort of cartoon innocence that frees them of any culpability for their actions and enables everybody to relax and have a good time. Good. 10 minutes later they're trying to steal sports cars from a moving train. At 130 minutes, Fast 5 is overlong and could have benefited from the removal of some filler scenes, even if they're fun to watch in their own right. There are also too many bits where The Rock is required to act, hardly his forte, and not enough where he's watchably physical. In particular, the eagerly anticipated fight scene between him and Diesel is too brief and too unimaginative, as well as being poorly shot. When it comes to the car scenes, though, Lin comes into his own as a director and there's lots to enjoy. The final big action set piece is tremendously destructive and great fun. The pacing is good in these scenes and there are enough twists and turns to keep the audience guessing, even if the overall plot sticks strictly to formula. Fast 5 isn't exactly sophisticated cinema, but it fulfills its remit with gusto and will often have you on the edge of your seat. Its tongue-in-cheek humor plays well with audience expectations and some small character moments are very deftly handled. Newcomers won't find it too hard to get into, and if you liked any of the others in the series, you'll love this one. After watching Fast 5, I realized it would become a quick classic you'll turn on while cleaning the living room or doing taxes. The action sequences force you to suspend just enough belief without becoming ridiculous, and the story isn't so complicated you need to pay deep attention. I chose Fast 5 as this week's movie review simply because I didn't want to watch Hoodwinked 2, Hood vs Evil. I don't think anyone can blame me. How Hoodwinked 2 got a green light for production makes me wonder if Pluto Nash 2, Pluto vs Plato, or Waterworld 2, Still Sucking will be in production anytime soon. Yup, that movie is probably as unfunny as my witty movie titles. I had only seen the first Fast and Furious, and so I wasn't sure if I would be confused for most of this movie's plot. However, I can safely say this movie stands on its own. Sure, there are moments you realize are supposed to be special for those fans who are in the know of all the films, such as the "We're Getting the Band Back Together" montage where they assemble their team of professional crooks. But the scenes are done in such a way that even as an outsider, you appreciate them. The backstory of the whole film is presented in such a way that it catches up those who have been away, yet doesn't bore those that have been faithful followers. You get the idea there is history, then you move on to the plot. The direction by Justin Lin manages to capture instant caring and understanding of each character. From the moment the movie starts, you feel for the leads, and you cheer for them. This is something many directors miss. Yet in this film it is achieved without beating the audience over the head with "this is the good guy, love him. This is the bad guy, see, he just squashed a baby" moments. Which is amazing considering every character in this film has a tragic flaw. It's done subtly enough. Okay, maybe the part where the wall of a train is ripped off and Vin Diesel is revealed in holy white light wearing a cross on his neck might be a little over the top. But, it only lasts a second. One heavenly, divine, biblical second. And so it was good. Wow. Some may read that and think I'm gay instead of realizing the ironic humor. Trust me, I don't think Vin Diesel is cute. Paul Walker on the other hand. I have wondered since the first movie why this guy isn't in more movies. He has Brad Pitt style, without pretentiousness. He maintains a great sense of being outside his criminal group even after 5 movies of being thrust in the middle of them. His character, his complex emotions, and his tough deck signs are played well throughout the film. There were some odd moments. While it was a good match to see Vin Diesel vs Dwayne Johnson, I kept thinking that I was watching the pacifier fight the Tooth Fairy. Which doesn't say much against this film as much as it says against these two actors and their choices in scripts. Also, the fight sequences were filmed too close with too many quick cuts. When you see sequences filmed in such a way, it's usually a red flag signifying, hey, these guys don't know what they are doing, but if we blur the actions quickly, we can pass it by you. There was, what was supposed to be a heartwarming, insightful scene between Vin Diesel and the lady cop, Elsa Pataky. But the whole time it was being played, I thought to myself, please direct this like Keanu Reeves in Speed, few words, few shots. In the final action sequence, over 25 police officers are rammed off the road in graphic, violent accidents. Yet you are expected to just write them off as necessary casualties to the worthy cause of the heroes. Even though the last shot shows a corpse of an officer hanging out of the window of a clearly fatally smashed car, you're expected to smile and wish your best to the victors. All that aside, it was what it aimed to be. It was a fun ride adding to a successful franchise. Once this movie hits DVD or syndication, you'll find yourself turning it on for a quick distraction while you accomplish more important tasks. For mindless fun, this is a hit. It's not often that a summer blockbuster spawns a large number of sequels. And considering how awful 2001's The Fast and the Furious was, who would have imagined it'd launch a franchise still kicking a decade later? Moreover, who the hell would have thought that the film's 4th sequel would actually be good? 2011's Fast 5 is easily the best, most satisfying Fast and the Furious picture so far, on top of being the franchise's first genuinely good film. It's a pretty dopey, cliched slice of summertime entertainment, but it's also a lot of skillful fun. Added to this, Fast 5 is not hindered by all the usual issues. Against all odds, the dialogue is actually involving, the dramatic elements are perfectly tolerable, and the formula has been altered, thus introducing much needed innovation into a franchise long past its expiration date. Fast 5 picks up after Fast and Furious ended, with Dominic Toretto, Diesel, being freed from an in-transit prison bus by his sister Mia, Brewster, and former FBI agent Brian O'Connor, Walker. Now fugitives being actively pursued by the authorities, the trio head to the streets of Rio de Janeiro, whereupon they fall into the bad graces of powerful drug kingpin Hernan Reyes de Almeida. Hoping to buy their freedom and give up life as fugitives, Dom, Brian, and Mia start planning a heist to rob Reyes of $100 million. It's a daring mission, so the trio pull together a team of friendly faces, including such former partners as Roman, Gibson, Tej, Ludacris, and Han Kong. However, a hulking federal agent named Hobbs Johnson is on their trail, working as fast as possible to bring down the fugitives by any means necessary. It's doubtful that Fast 5 can be considered positive for Rio's tourism industry. After all, the plot concerns the city's seedy underside of corrupt police, drug dealers, and armed teenagers. Indeed, the depiction of the city is very different to that which was seen in the 2011 animated film Rio. Screenwriter Chris Morgan might have been responsible for the appalling Tokyo Drift and 2009's average Fast and Furious, but his script for Fast 5 is superlative. Astonishingly, the dialogue is not bland or awful, the repartee is actually witty, with engaging character interaction and a few notably amusing exchanges between Roman and Tej. The flick isn't Harold Pinter or anything, but it is robust and awesome. And mercifully, the street racing aspect takes a backseat for this story. Fast 5 is more concerned with a heist in the vein of the Italian Job and Ocean's 11. Longtime fans of the series may be disappointed with the lack of street racing, but the change is good, it denotes progress in the franchise, and, after all, the racing angle ran out of steam a few movies ago. To maintain fidelity to the series, a random street race does happen for the sake of having a street race, but it's the most uninspired set piece in the film. Returning to the franchise, director Justin Lin and his team set out to achieve the majority of Fast 5's action sequences with practical effects. Fortunately, the results are spectacular, the stunts are phenomenal and the vehicular carnage feels real, making the action scenes all the more exhilarating. If CGI was used at all, it's seldom obvious. The extended climax, a car chase through the streets of Rio, is especially rewarding. Cars are smashed and buildings are decimated, making Fast 5 worth a hearty recommendation on the basis of the sequence alone. Of course, a suspension of disbelief is often required for this franchise, and Fast 5 is no exception. Patently ridiculous stuff does happen, but it's easy to suspend your disbelief thanks to the old-fashioned filmmaking techniques. Also thrown into the mix are a few exciting shootouts, and even an awesome showdown between Vin Diesel and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the latter of whom looks buff enough to wrestle a fucking T-Rex and come out victorious. Another contributing factor to Fast 5's success is the actors, all of whom are better than they had any right to be. The real surprise is Paul Walker, whose acting has drastically improved since the first Fast and the Furious. No longer wooden, Walker's performance is solid and believable, and he always looks in the moment. Even Vin Diesel's work is strong here, and AJordana Brewster doesn't get on the nerves anymore. To make the reunion a bit more complete, Matt Schultz is also seen here as Vince for the first time since the 2001 original. And Walker's Too Fast Too Furious co-star Tyrese Gibson returned for this film as well, delivering an amiable, funny performance as Roman. Meanwhile, rapper-turned-actor Ludacris, another cast member from Too Fast Too Furious, is equally entertaining as Tej. Heck, even Sung Kang is good here. This is his most tolerable performance in the series to date. The best of the bunch, though, is without a doubt Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson playing the tough-as-nails Hobbs. An intimidating badass, Johnson is at long last proving that he still has what it takes to be the next Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's inarguably the strongest antagonist the series has seen to date. Fast 5 runs a mammoth 130 minutes, making it the longest entry in the series by a good 20 minutes, but it's never boring, the pacing is strong and there's always something interesting going on. Put alongside its subpar predecessors, this is an excellent offering of action entertainment, slickly directed, well-paced, and irresistibly entertaining. And be sure to watch until the end of the credits for an exciting setup for the inevitable sixth film that this reviewer is actually looking forward to it. I cannot believe I actually just wrote that. When people become aware that I review films, At the first sign of disagreement on the merits of the latest blockbuster, someone inevitably wheels out the line that I, as a snobby film connoisseur, didn't like it because it wasn't made for me, that it was only supposed to be fun, too stupid to bear up to my apparently never-ending critical analysis. Fast 5 is the opposite of that. It's a movie that isn't nearly stupid enough, that tries to be clever when there is no one within a 50-mile radius of a screening who wants to see anything other than an hour and a half of explosive car chases, stunts galore and women of trouser-bursting sexiness. Character development. Social commentary. A goddamn pregnancy subplot. Woefully done, and detrimental to what should have been an extravaganza of brainless entertainment, had it stuck to the tone of the brilliant opening. I didn't see the last movie, but am told this one picks up where that one ended, with Vin Diesel's Dominic being convicted and sent to prison. Fortunately, his old gang are waiting to execute what must be one of the worst thought-through breakouts in the history of human planning, but it looks spectacular, so logic be damned. Exactly, Fast 5. That's what I wanted from you. Not a trace of common sense, just balls-out lunacy. Things get better from there, with a sequence on a train that, one shot of bad CGI aside, has some brilliantly physical stunts and action escalated to levels of preposterousness above and beyond anything I could have imagined. At least, until the film finally recaptures the same spirit for its climax. It's a giddy joy, making the come down when the movie starts trying to do plot and character all the more distressing. Every moment the cast are out of their cars, Fast 5 struggles terribly. Character depth only works when you have actors capable of some degree of subtlety, and that's not what these guys are here for. In fact, the performances turn out to be among the film's highlights because they're hilariously dreadful. Vin Diesel's attempts at emoting produces some brilliantly overwrought grimaces, while his voice is at such a ridiculous level of deepness, take notes, Christian Bale, that you can imagine him waking up every morning and gargling a quarry. Paul Walker, oh bless you, Paul Walker, appears lost at being asked to do anything other than look good behind the wheel of a fast car. He tries so very hard, but never manages to push himself to a second facial expression or undeadify his eyes. Asking him to perform this misconceived character work is completely unfair, because even if he'd managed to elevate his acting, the material would still be abysmal. But in a roundabout way, this makes him sympathetic because it seems he shares the desire for the movie to stop trying to do anything worthy and get back to more roaring muscle cars and explosions. In that respect, this is his finest work to date, even if it is completely by accident. The rest of the cast don't have much to do other than express bravado, but Tyrese Gibson has a lot of fun delivering some terrible one-liners. The girls mostly stand around and look gorgeous, which is fine to an extent, but they look even sexier when driving the hell out of a pimped-out racing car, so it's disappointing they don't get involved in the two major chase sequences. The unquestionable standout from this motley crew is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who gives a performance of such hilariously deranged intensity that the screen electrifies at his every appearance. His agent Hobbs is a perfect fit in every way for this movie, from his psychotic thornbush of a goatee, intergalactic biceps and goggle-eyed stare. He's obviously supposed to be the mirror to Vin Diesel's Toretto, his existence defined by enforcing his duty where Toretto lives for freedom and loyalty. Fast 5 is their unrequited love story. Most of their scenes together are framed in mid-shot, presumably to keep their dueling erections out of sight. When the two finally grapple, a battle of the beefcake titans ruined by slipshot editing and distracting motion blur, it's less a fight scene than two burly men trying to express their love in the only way they know how, wrapping each other in their sweaty muscles and squeezing away their frustration, ending with one straddling the other in a pool of blood and sweat but unable to fulfill their desires under the judgmental eyes of the cohorts surrounding them. It's like Twilight, but with bodybuilders. The movie has so many things going for it, whether intentionally or not, but the middle act just kills it. Rumors that the series is being moved into crime thriller territory could prove suicidal, because everything related to the Ocean's 11 style heist is flat and rife with filler material dragging out the unnecessary over 2-hour running time. It's even more difficult to feel involved with any of this when the film's main villain, against whom Toretto has a vendetta for no immediately apparent reason, is so weak. The position is filled by a corrupt Brazilian corporate head, whose modus operandi is to give the poor something to lose, accommodation, education, running water, so that he can use them in his drug smuggling and money laundering operations. Is it just me, or does that sound pretty fair? Sure, he's kind of a turd when his underlings disobey him, but it's not as though most of the people working for him would have great employment prospects anyway, and it sounds like they get a passable enough way of life in exchange. Weirder still is that the one thing has been cut from this arduous middle section is a street race. We get Toretto and a racer rival exchanging tough talk, then cut straight back to the garage where Toretto has won the race and the car. Considering how much dead wood there is elsewhere, it's infuriatingly typical of how utterly misguided this middle act is that the one thing deemed unwanted is an action sequence that, heaven forfend, risked being fun. While the logical fallacies are easy to ignore when the action is in full swing, they become increasingly evident and frustrating during this stretch, which must amount to at least an hour, although it feels like so much more, which consists mostly of planning and flat dialogue exchanges. Fortunately, the movie picks itself up with a climactic chase scene that is almost worth the prior agony. It's ever bit the glorious noisy nonsense promised by the opening 20 minutes and so grievously missed ever since, abandoning every scrap of realism in favor of pounding adrenaline. It will surely be among the best action sequences of the year, living up to every word of the Fast and Furious name. The stupider that Fast 5 allows itself to be, the better it is, making it a great shame that so much of the movie is spent coasting when such a great engine was parked under the hood. There's not a brain at work in any of Fast 5's 2.5 hours, but it goes through them with such reckless abandon that I simply couldn't tear myself away. As was the case with the first 4 films, it's a high-octane, pedal-to-the-metal thrill ride in which story plays second fiddle to stunts, almost all of them involving cars. I would, of course, prefer a film in which an effort was made with plot and character development. At the same time, I can't deny the considerable craft that went into the action sequences. Watching the cars as they flipped, crashed, flew, and instantly turned tight corners was, in its own adrenaline-pumping way, like watching a well-choreographed ballet recital. It was hypnotic. I'm usually immune to mind-numbing action, but for the first time in ages, I put my rational brain on autopilot and just enjoyed the film for what it was. It begins with former FBI agent Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker, leading an assault on the prison transport bus carrying Dom Toretto, Vin Diesel. They free him by using their cars to flip the bus over. I don't mean that it turns on its side and drags along the pavement for a few hundred feet. It actually does slow-motion somersaults in mid-air before crashing upside down in spectacular fashion. No one would have been able to survive this, but never mind. Brian and Dom, along with Dom's sister, Mia, AJordana Brewster, also Brian's girlfriend, flee to Rio de Janeiro. After taking part in an impossible but spectacular car heist from the side of a moving train, they cross paths with a corrupt Brazilian businessman named Hernan Reyes, Joaquim de Almeida, who has made millions in illicit business activities. They decide to take on the proverbial last job and steal all of Reyes' money. A robbery of this magnitude requires a specialized team. Here enters incidental characters played by Chris Ludacris Bridges, Tyrese Gibson, Sung Kang, Gal Gadot, Tigo Calderone, and Don Omar, who each have an area of expertise. Many of them are little more than comedy relief. Calderone and Omar in particular bicker as if they were a married couple, and in 2 languages, no less. Bridges and Gibson have a few amusing scenes together, and they can always be counted on for a wisest remark. There's also some sexual tension between Kang and Gadot, in large part because of the stark contrast between the latter's flagrant feminine assets and the former's complete lack of sex appeal. Perhaps there's also something darkly humorous about the fate of Kang's character in The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift, which, chronologically, takes place after the events of this film. but why am I even suggesting that anyone will much care about chronology? Hot on DOM and Brian's trail is DSS agent Luke Hobbs, Dwayne Johnson, a deadly serious, hulking gorilla of a man who's hilariously Valjean-esque in his determination. He's partnered with a local cop named Elena Navis, Elsa Pataki, who was selected because of her resolve and her honesty, which are apparently rare qualities in Brazilian law enforcement. I'll have to take their word for it, I've never been to Brazil. She has something in common with DOM, they both lost someone near and dear to them. Because of this, he believes she's capable of understanding his motives. I bring this up because of an appropriate but highly unlikely alliance made in the latter half of the film. Only in movies like this do such things happen. Maybe that's why we love them so much. There isn't much in this movie in the way of illegal street racing, but there is a breathtaking car chase near the end involving DOM, Brian, and Rhea's money vault, which they have tethered to their cars. Because they constantly make hairpin turns, the vault repeatedly swings around loosely like a pendulum, leaving glorious destruction in its wake. And just wait until you see the pileup of police cars on the Rio-Niterói bridge, which, now that I think of it, seemed miraculously deserted. Strange, given a city notorious for its traffic congestion. Oh, but there I go again, using my brain. I have to keep reminding myself that action movies aren't supposed to play by the rules. Some action movies are so thoroughly cheerless and unexciting that they seem to exist primarily to be made fun of. What's praiseworthy about Fast 5 is that the actors and filmmakers were smart enough to not take the material seriously. It's a film to surrender yourself to, either you suspend disbelief, or you go home. There really isn't anything I can say about the story or the performances since that really isn't what the film is about. It's about the spectacle of the whole thing. All we're meant to focus on is the stunt work and the special effects, and believe you me, they were both quite impressive. And now that I've taken a mental break, I think it's about time I get back into the real world. All good things must come to an end, sadly. This film, directed by Justin Lin, written by Chris Morgan, based on characters, produced by Neal H. Moritz, starring Vin Diesel, cinematography Stephen F. Winden, edited by Christian Wagner, music by Brian Tyler, production companies Universal Pictures, distributed by Universal Pictures, release dates April 15, 2011, running time 130 minutes, country United States, language English, budget $125 million, box office $630 million.